I discovered that my fiance, who was usually proud, aloof, and ice cold, would often talk to thin air whenever no one was around. At first, I caught her once and didn't think much of it, but one day I accidentally heard her say the word system, and that was when I realized this might be a pretty huge deal. It turned out that my fiance, Yingbing, had once ranked among the nine heavens in her previous life. The nine heavens meant the nine strongest people in all the nine heavens and 10 earths. Now that she had been reborn, she was bound to a peerless prodigy system. As long as she ranked first among people of the same generation, she would receive rewards. If she failed to become number one, then after the rankings were announced, she had to carry out the loser's punishment toward the person in first place. Yingbing originally thought collecting rewards from a system would be easy, but after several years had passed, she had always been second place, and more than once she had been forced to carry out the loser's punishment on her own fiancé. At this moment, on the official road through the eastern wasteland, more than a dozen carriages were hurrying along at full speed. I lifted the curtain of the carriage only to get choked by the dust blowing up outside and cough twice. Young Master Ma, there are still 2 more days before we reach Qingyuan sect, the steward driving the carriage said with a smile. After speaking, he cautiously added, the carriages in our residence are already as comfortable as it gets. I sighed in my heart. High-speed rail and airplanes were still way better. 2 days ago, I had broken through the mystery in the womb and awakened the memories of my previous life. In my last life, I had lived in a place called Blue Star. It had advanced modern technology. This place was different. Here, everyone revered martial arts. I had only just turned 16. And before I could enjoy enough of this laid-back, rich young master life in the ancient world, my father stuffed me into a carriage and sent me off to Qingyuan sect, one of the 3 great sects of Xi'an Prefecture, to take the entrance examination. Martial arts? Just thinking about it made me excited, and I raised my eyes toward the 3 suns hanging high in the sky. It was said that the 3 suns in the heavens had been painted there by 2 different emperors of Great Yu. That wasn't some myth or legend. It was history, clearly recorded. An hour later, the convoy protected by the escort agency slowly stopped at an inn. I got out of the carriage and turned to look behind me. A young woman stepped down from the carriage at the rear. Yingbing was dressed in a light electric blue outfit, beautiful enough to take one's breath away. The Li family and the Ying family had been close family friends for generations. Our grandfathers had been close, and by our generation, the elders of the 2 families had even agreed to let the younger ones marry and make the bond even closer. Is there anything you want to eat? I'll have the kitchen make it, I casually said to Yingbing. She ignored me completely. She didn't even spare me a glance before walking straight into the inn. Miss Ying's family only recently went through a great upheaval, so the steward, hurriedly began. But before he could finish, I cut him off. No need to explain for her. I was the one who acted ridiculously before. I felt helpless. How had changing worlds somehow turned me into a brat? A few years ago, a disaster struck the city and the Ying family met with tragedy. Yingbing alone survived. My father had her settled temporarily in the Li residence. I had deliberately bullied her plenty of times while secretly liking her at the same time. It was kind of like a middle school boy liking a girl, then deliberately tugging her hair to get her attention. As everyone knows, people whose whole family gets wiped out in stories are usually anything but ordinary. As a former web novel fan, my thoughts naturally wandered. Your ginseng soup is here. The waiter came over with a grin, carrying a tray. The corners of my mouth twitched, and I muttered, I've lived through 2 lives already. How come I don't have a cheat like a golden finger or something? Hello, you do. Who said that? I sprang up like a cat that had just had its tail stepped on. Young master? The steward looked puzzled. Nothing. Must have been ringing in my ears. I frowned, but just as I was wondering whether I had imagined it, that voice rang out in my mind again. Since the host has sincerely and earnestly asked, this system can only show itself. So if I hadn't asked, you weren't planning to come out at all in this lifetime? But that wasn't the important part. System, what do you do? This system is an investment rebate system. The host may invest in any target. The stronger the target's fate, the better the reward obtained. If the investment target achieves a major breakthrough, the host may also receive an additional reward. My eyebrows lifted slightly. Any target? Can I invest in myself? The fate eye has now been granted to the host. Whether a target has investment value is for the host to judge. I raised my head and looked toward the people eating and resting in the main hall. Lines of information appeared over them. Name Hiyu, age 16. Root bone, ordinary. Realm, chi blood, first vein, born a woodcutter. His travel money was borrowed from Lin Li, and he is currently worrying about paying it back. Name, Chen Xiaoyan, age 16. I looked over several people. Most of their fates were white and at best only green. In short, none of them were especially worth investing in. Sir, your ginseng soup is ready, just as you requested. We added 10-year-old wild mountain ginseng. I'll bring it to the 2nd floor for you, the inn waiter called out, and was about to carry the stone container upstairs. My heart stirred and I stopped him. Under the waiter's puzzled gaze, I took the container from his hands. My eyes turned toward the room at the very end of the 2nd floor. What kind of fate would my fiancé have? Yingbing was sitting quietly by the window. When she saw that it was me entering the room, Her brows drew together slightly, but I had no time to read her expression anymore. I was already standing there completely stunned. Name Yingbing, age 16. Root bone, Taiyin moon phoenix body. Realm, none. At that point, my fate eye showed a trace of blur, as if the karma entwined around her was simply too great, causing some interference. A few seconds later, the rest of the information slowly appeared. Fate read, evaluation, hidden deep in an abyss, ice as life and autumn waters as spirit, bearing the aspect of an emperor. Though fate is full of twists and turns, she will always turn danger into safety. Her wings are not yet full, but when the winds and clouds change, she will surely hang high above the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Recent encounter. Before her meridians are opened, the Taiyin moon phoenix body appears outwardly as a body of severed meridians. Before completely mastering the power of Taiyin, she must endure bitter, bone-deep cold every single day. This was way too sudden. I could only think, damn. After setting the ginseng soup down, I told her to drink it while it was hot and then left the room. After I walked away, Yingbing murmured softly, "So I returned on this very day." A crisp sound suddenly rang by her ear. "Who's there?" Yingbing's eyes instantly narrowed. But the voice, as fine as a spiderweb, sounded again. "System binding successful." In the room next door, I lay there staring blankly at the ceiling. The good news was that my childhood sweetheart had the aura of a future emperor. The bad news was that my relationship with her wasn't exactly good, and I had been bouncing around in front of her like an idiot every day. Once we entered Qingyuan's sect, she would definitely shine brilliantly. I couldn't help imagining one of those scenes from novels where the protagonist gets tested for talent and the whole village gasps in shock, while the little villains who used to bully the protagonist start trembling in fear and lining up to get their faces slapped. Just then, the system notification sounded. You invested 1 bowl of mountain ginseng soup. Reward, 1 celestial spirit vitality replenishing pill. I tossed the pill into my mouth and smacked my lips. It felt as if an old man on the verge of death had suddenly grown decades younger. If I went to practice martial arts now, then even if I wasn't some rare piece of jade or peerless steed, I'd at least be a solid stone without flaws. I secretly clicked my tongue. This investment rebate was way too outrageous, and this was only from a bowl of soup. Of course, the biggest reason was probably because the investment target was a girl blessed by heaven's fate. From what I remembered, Yingbing lived up to her name. Her personality could basically be summed up in 3 words: an ice lump. Fixing our relationship was definitely going to be a long road, but the rebates still had to be farmed. A red fate like hers was something I probably wouldn't encounter again in 8 lifetimes if I missed it now. That night, lying in bed, Yingbing fell into deep thought. She had dreamed. She dreamed of the life she had lived in her previous incarnation. After entering Qingyuan Mountain, she had first been identified as having severed meridians. Half a year later, she encountered a stroke of fortune and was finally able to open them. After that, she revealed her monstrous talent and left her entire generation far behind. By the age of 18, even the sect master of Qingyuan's sect was no longer her opponent. She walked out of the eastern wasteland and saw a broader world. The 9 heavens and 10 earths were simply too vast. It was a dazzling age. Yet she had still been the brightest existence within that rolling tide of destiny. In the end, she ranked among the 9 heavens and stood shoulder to shoulder with the 5 emperors of the Yu dynasty in the central continent. How ridiculous! Yingbing slowly opened her eyes. Everything around her reminded her that she had truly returned to the past, and she had even encountered something that had never appeared in her previous life. Before her eyes floated a strange set of words. This system is the Peerless Prodigy system, dedicated to helping the host achieve an invincible path. Only Yingbing could see the text, but her expression remained indifferent. An invincible path? She had already walked that road once. In her previous life, even the emperors of the land had only been able to match her by relying on special means. At her full peak, she probably had to look through the history books to find anyone who qualified as an opponent. In this life, she would only become stronger. At that moment, another line of information surfaced before the system. Clear stage reward. Chance to become immortal. Yingbing's breathing stopped for an instant. Immortality was a word that existed only in legend. It was said that in every era of the 9 heavens and 10 earths, there would appear one unique immortal, someone truly transcendent, truly deathless. Yet ever since the Yu dynasty had stabilized the realm, becoming immortal had become nothing more than a legend, as though that road had been completely severed, making it all the more mysterious. In her previous life, with the gates to immortality closed, Yingbing had chosen one of the hardest possible roads, one that only a tiny handful of people throughout history had ever succeeded on, but in the end she had still fallen one step short. And now this so-called system was actually offering a chance at immortality. Yingbing calmed herself and asked, "What does challenge mean?" Each month, this system will rank the talented martial artists of the same generation within a given region. After the rankings are announced, rewards will be distributed according to the host's placement. Current ranking range, Eastern Wasteland domain. In an instant, countless memories appeared in Yingbing's mind. They were not only the rules of the system, but also its various restrictions. For example, she was forbidden from using any external factors to interfere with a challenge. She was not allowed to reveal the existence of the system and make others deliberately yield to her. Rules like these completely blocked off all the clever shortcuts. But in her previous life, Yingbing had already been synonymous with genius and monstrosity in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Now she also possessed the memories of that former life. If she walked that road a second time, she would only become stronger than before. If what the system said was true, then it would drastically shorten the time needed for her to return to her peak, perhaps even allow her to step into that unknowable realm. Prompt. Do you wish to activate the penalty mechanism? After activation, rewards will become more generous. But after the rankings are announced, you must carry out the loser's punishment toward the first-ranked person. Ying Bing's choice was obvious. She was certain that she would be ranked first. To her, this punishment was basically non-existent. The next day, breakfast had been set on the table. I casually picked up a meat bun and used the corner of my eye to glance at Ying Bing beside me. In front of her, there was only a bowl of plain white porridge. Just eating this in the morning isn't enough. I pushed the plate with the eggs toward her. Ying Bing said nothing and only raised her eyes to look at me. Feeling a little awkward, I opened my mouth. About what happened before? I'm sorry. I don't expect just a few words to clear everything away. If you still have anger in your heart, then... Before I could finish, Ying Bing lightly replied while peeling an egg, "It doesn't matter." I froze for a moment. I didn't see even the slightest hint of insincerity on her face. Rather than forgiveness, it felt more like indifference. Those things simply weren't important enough to be kept in mind. Ying Bing's cheeks moved slightly as she ate, and she never gave me one extra bit of attention after that. In Ying Bing's memories, my talent was mediocre. I had only barely entered Qingyuan's sect. After wasting a year in the outer sect, I was eliminated and sent out, while by that time she had already become the brightest figure of her generation. In Ying Bing's heart, perhaps I didn't even count as a passing guest in her life. Across from her, the movement of my chopsticks paused slightly. You invested 1 egg in 1 bowl of white porridge. Reward, 1,000 taels in silver notes. For some reason, I felt emotional. If only she could eat a little more, then just by feeding her 3 meals a day, I could become stupidly rich. Tonight, I absolutely had to prepare a midnight snack. 2 days later, our group arrived at Xi'an Prefecture City. There were countless wagons and caravans coming and going. At the enormous city gate, the noisy rush of horses and carriages sounded like floodwaters bursting through a sluice. Looking into the distance at Qingyuan Mountain, many people revealed expressions of yearning. Great Yu was a nation founded on martial force, a world ruled by sects. Under the sky of Xi'an Prefecture, there was only one cloud, and that cloud was Qingyuan sect. After entering the city, we arrived at an inn. "Excuse me, 2 upper rooms," I said to the clerk at the counter. "One for me and one for Ying Bing. The steward and the others traveling with us have already dropped off the luggage and gone back with the escort agency. Sorry, sir. We don't have many upper rooms left. If you came together, there's only 1 room available," the man behind the counter said apologetically. And just like that, Ying Bing and I ended up staying in the same guest room. After tidying the luggage inside, I said, "By the way, Father said there's a doctor in the city he knows well, and his medical skills are excellent. How about we go see him today?" Sitting at the tea table, Ying Bing took a sip of hot tea and shook her head. I said helplessly, "Let's go anyway. Even if it only eases the symptoms a little, that would still be good." Ying Bing remained silent. She looked at me as if trying to see a flower growing out of my face. "Father sent money with us. I have to give him some kind of report. Sanyang Medical Hall isn't far either. It's only 2 streets away." I deliberately furrowed my brows as I said it. Sanyang Medical Hall. Ying Bing gently took another sip of tea, as if savoring those words. After lowering her eyes for a moment, she finally nodded. At Sanyang Medical Hall, I took out the letter from my father's sleeve and handed it over. The middle-aged man opened it and skimmed it once, and more of a smile appeared on his face. That kid DeLong, so he still remembered this old man after all. Ying Bing's brows moved almost imperceptibly. I also sensed something off. This man looked about the same age as my father, so why did he speak like some ancient senior? The medicine boy nearby proudly said, "Master is 96 years old this year." My mouth opened slightly. People always said studying medicine made you age faster, so how did someone end up looking younger and younger the more he studied? Had he practiced some kind of cultivation method, or perhaps learned the art of preserving health? Just a minor Tao, nothing worth mentioning, the middle-aged man said. "Your father said the patient is this young lady, right? Come here." He waved Ying Bing over. After Ying Bing sat down opposite him, the man flicked his finger and shot out a strand of golden thread which wound around her pale, slender fingers. I watched with great interest. Seeing that I looked a little worried, the medicine boy coaxed me. "Relax. In all the world there are very few illnesses my master cannot cure." The middle-aged man curled his lips a little at those words. Clearly he quite enjoyed hearing them. But in the very next second, he let out a surprised sound and frowned. The golden thread trembled, and a layer of frost appeared, rapidly spreading from Ying Bing's fingertip along the thread. Like he had been shocked by electricity, the middle-aged man took the initiative to snap the golden thread, and then exhaled with lingering fear. "Well?" I asked. The man's brows were practically twisted into the character for River. After thinking hard for a while, he shook his head at Yingbing and said, "Unbelievable. By all logic, you shouldn't have lived until today. Little girl, you must have once been diagnosed with severed meridians, correct?" Yingbing nodded. The man pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "My guess is that this may not be severed meridians at all, but some kind of special physique. As for what kind exactly, I'd need to search through ancient texts. Since it isn't an illness, there's no way to truly treat it. I can only try to refine some medicine to reduce your pain." Yingbing was startled for an instant, then returned to calm. To be able to see this much meant the man's medical skill ranked among the very best in all Ziyang Prefecture. Even she herself had only learned the answer later, after going to the Central Divine Continent and finding it in an ancient hidden inheritance. That ancient text recorded 10 physiques so rare they could shake all ages. The author had named them the 10 extreme bodies. Of those 10, aside from the Taiyin Moon Phoenix body, the other 9 had already vanished, existing only in legend and speculation. This is a pure yang pill that I refined. It should be effective. 200 taels of silver? The middle-aged man took out a porcelain bottle. It wasn't exactly cheap, but it wasn't too outrageous either. I nodded and was just about to pay, but the man slowly raised 2 fingers. 200 taels per pill. I immediately slammed a thick stack of banknotes onto the table like a stage magician and said, "Fine, then I want a whole bottle." Yingbing's brows lifted. Even from a rough glance, that thick stack looked like more than 10,000 taels. Even in Ziyang Prefecture City, where land was worth its weight in gold, it was enough to buy a luxurious mansion. I smiled shyly. "That should be enough, right? What, are you trying to buy wholesale from me? Planning to take these home and eat them like meals?" "1 bottle, 12 pills," the middle-aged man said, the corners of his mouth twitching as he pushed the bottle forward. "That works too," I nodded reluctantly. Then I cupped my hands in salute and left with Yingbing. The middle-aged man stroked his chin suspiciously. "Wasn't I told these 2 little brats have a terrible relationship? Why does it look like he's worried he didn't spend enough?" He picked up the frosted golden thread from the floor, and his expression turned thoughtful. "If this really is some kind of physique, then this child's talent is probably unimaginable. Bring the pill furnace along." Elsewhere, the once bustling night market had grown sparse. Only the street lamps that had not yet burned out still swayed gently. What a pity. I heard the night market in Ziyang Prefecture has lots of snacks. Next time we'll have to come earlier. In my hand, I held 2 skewers of willow leaf roast, a local specialty of Ziyang Prefecture. One bite into it, and it was fresh, fragrant, and delicious without the slightest fishy taste. Even the tiny bones were crispy. "Try some." I turned back as I spoke. Yingbing kept her eyes straight ahead. Looking at the boy whose lips still glistened with oil, doubt rose in her heart. After being reborn, she had thought everything would unfold just as expected, but this fiancé in front of her seemed to have become the exception. Why? For the first time, Yingbing asked the question on her own initiative. In a good mood, I grinned. "If the hard way doesn't work, then I can only go with the soft way. Maybe you're the type who softens once someone smooths your fur." The moment the words fell, the atmosphere became a little awkward. Not having received a satisfactory answer, Yingbing's gaze remained calm. Clearly, she treated my joking answer like empty air. All right. You suffered a lot on my account before. Think of this as compensation, or as an investment, whatever. In total, it was only a little over 2,000 taels. Once I enter Qingyuan sect, that'll be pocket change." I waved my hand with the swagger of a rich man. Yingbing's brows drew together slightly. Where had this confidence come from? In her previous life, he had clearly only made it into the outer sect, and even that had been by the skin of his teeth. His natural aptitude could be described as painfully ordinary. The night wind blew by and the lamp shadows swayed. Yingbing suddenly gave a faint start. In the dust-covered memories of the past, a distant and unfamiliar figure flashed by. It was her former self, kneeling under countless watchful eyes and bowing to a Qingyuan sect elder. "Within half a year, I will definitely open my meridians." Back then, where had her own confidence come from? "I'll remember this favor," Yingbing said, her pleasant voice falling softly. "You invested 12 pure yang pills. Your words caused a change in the target's state of mind. This investment successfully altered the target's life trajectory. The feedback reward will receive a critical hit. Congratulations, host. Special feedback obtained. A change in her state of mind?" I was baffled. I hadn't even said anything especially profound. A heaven-favored girl really was a heaven-favored girl. She could gain insight from even this. A special feedback reward with a critical hit. No matter how I looked at it, it felt like a sign that something ridiculously good was about to happen. Back at the inn, the curtains of the large bed were lowered and tied, hiding Yingbing's figure behind them. I withdrew my gaze, hugged my blanket, and lay down on the soft couch, looking at the reward I had just obtained. Banished immortal body. An immortal frame descends into the rolling mortal world. Countless mysteries arise from this origin. Claim now? The introduction was simple enough, but the art style seemed a little off. This was clearly a martial arts world. Why did this sound so absurdly high-end? Still, it sounded pretty impressive, so I claimed it immediately. In an instant, it felt as if thunder had torn apart the clouds inside my mind, plunging everything into chaos. I could neither see nor hear. I lost consciousness. On the bed not far away, Ying Bing hugged her legs, her lips pale white. Her whole body seemed as though it had been placed in an Arctic ice prison, but she was already used to it. There was no trace of panic or pain on her face, only calm. Ying Bing knew this torment would end once she mastered the power of Taiyin. Before that, she first had to open her meridians. She raised the pure yang pill and swallowed it. A trace of warmth rose from her dantian and slowly flowed through her meridians. Opening them before the initiation ceremony would not be a problem. Then she suddenly remembered something. Lifting the bed curtain, Yingbing looked toward the couch. The boy was lying there peacefully, even letting out light snores. He was sleeping quite soundly. He's actually fine? The next morning, I opened my eyes on the couch. On the surface, I still looked like myself. But even if I simply stood there, I gave people the feeling of being naturally fused with the world. Name Li Ju, age 16. Root bone, banished immortal body. Realm, none. Fate? Evaluation. Bears an immortal body. Destiny and chaos. Future impossible to predict. Recent encounter. Your relationship with your childhood sweetheart has eased. At least now you're better than strangers. I had thought my fate would turn purple, or maybe even gold. But instead it became 3 gigantic question marks. I picked up the kettle to make tea, only to find that the water inside had frozen into ice. The root of it all was the ice lump on the bed. A shocking chill radiated through the room, but I didn't feel cold at all. At the very least, it seemed I had become immune to heat and cold. Then there was no way I had to worry about getting eliminated at the initiation ceremony. At the very least, I should be able to get into the intersect, right? My mood brightened. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed. Ever since receiving the pure yang pills, Yingbing had stayed inside the room and never gone out. She neither ate nor drank. But I wasn't worried. Someone blessed with heaven-defying fate was hardly going to starve herself to death. It was probably because of her physique. Better not disturb her. So over those 2 days, the cold energy inside the guest room never faded. The furnishings inside were all ruined. I had to pay 500 taels in compensation before the matter was settled. On the morning of the 3rd day, Yingbing's face, white like porcelain, seemed a little rosier. She had opened her meridians. Successfully opening them meant she no longer bore the appearance of severed meridians, and it also meant the talent that had been hidden was finally seeing daylight again. This couldn't have happened without that bottle of pure yang pills. Come eat breakfast, I said with a smile. Yingbing picked up her bowl and softly said, "Thank you." My movements froze, and my eyes widened. The ice lump actually knew how to say thank you. After the 2 of us finished breakfast, we went downstairs together. Today was the day Qingyuan sect opened its gates. The surroundings were full of young boys and girls. It gave me the strange feeling of students gathering on a school field for morning exercises. After walking for about half the time it takes a stick of incense to burn, the sect gate of Qingyuan sect came into view, as well as many Qingyuan disciples dressed in different colors. In front of the disciples sat 7 figures behind long desks. As all of you have surely considered carefully, root bone is the first gate of martial practice. If your root bone is too poor, then the martial path will be difficult from the very first step. No matter how much effort you put in, it will amount to little more than a drop in the ocean. Those with meager root bone should not waste their time. You may leave on your own. The elder's voice rolled across the area like thunder, but nobody left. As the saying goes, since they were already here, they might as well try. Seeing this, the elder waved his hand. Then line up and come one by one for the bone test. As soon as he finished speaking, countless young men and women formed orderly lines under the guidance of Qingyuan sect disciples. The stewards seemed to have practiced some special technique. With a single pat to the tester's shoulder, they could roughly determine that person's root bone. Qingyuan sect divided root bone into 4 grades: A, B, C, and D. Anyone with at least C grade had the qualifications to enter the mountain gate. Even so, only 1 or 2 out of every 10 people managed to reach C grade or above. Just the first round alone would probably eliminate 80% of them. "Little girl, come up!" the elder in front beckoned. The moment Yingbing stepped out of the crowd, she drew countless gazes. She was simply too beautiful. Standing there in her light, cold silence, it felt as if all sound in the world had died away. It was impossible to ignore her. I rubbed my chin. Based on my experience reading novels, if nothing unexpected happened, then there were only 2 possibilities. Either Yingbing would turn out to be some monstrous genius, or she would turn out to be some trash nobody expected. With her overwhelming fate, there was no way she would just be ordinary among the crowd. Sure enough, the elder's brows immediately furrowed. She drew in her breath and actually prepared to use her internal energy to inspect Yingbing's root bone. The movement over here caused everyone to turn and look over, and even the other stewards grew curious. Testing an A-grade root bone shouldn't require this much fuss. In the next instant, the elder's voice spread through the entire area. "Yingbing, A-top." The crowd instantly erupted. A-top aptitude was rare, even in the history of Qingyuan sect. Earlier, Murong Xiao, who carried the title of Jiang Prefecture's Qilin child, had only barely been judged A-low, and Murong Xiao was already considered the greatest talent of the last 10 years. Under the attention of every kind of gaze, Yingbing became the center of the crowd. Yet the girl herself showed neither joy nor arrogance, because she knew this was nothing. The only reason she was graded A-top was because A-top was the highest grade Qingyuan sect had. To remain unmoved by honor or humiliation alike, that kind of temperament was equally rare. I look forward to your performance on the ascending heaven steps. The elder couldn't help praising her. The bone test only weeded out those who had no qualifications to practice martial arts. The real comprehensive test of talent was the second round, the ascending heaven steps. Yingbing nodded and stepped to one side with the others who had passed. Truly extraordinary. Perhaps this is the finest seedling I've seen in my life. Xuejin, still wearing that unassuming robe and stroking his long beard, let his eyes flicker with interest. He was not surprised by Yingbing's A-top root bone in the slightest. So this is the good seedling you said you found while going down the mountain? A lazy female voice sounded from not far away. The woman wore work clothes and leaned against her chair with her cheeks slightly flushed from drinking. That's her. I just don't know what level she'll reach on the ascending heaven steps, Xuejin said, glancing at the woman with some helplessness in his eyes. I like this girl, the woman in work clothes said frankly after taking a swig of wine. A group of elders instantly went speechless. Are you sure it isn't just because the little girl is stunningly beautiful? She doesn't suit the martial arts of your branch, Xuejin said helplessly. How does she not suit them? The woman in work clothes glared. Who are you calling not suited? You've trained yourself into a walking furnace. Looking at this girl, no matter how you see it, she shouldn't end up under your branch. A slightly cold voice cut in. Hanhei, you want to fight? The woman in work clothes cracked her knuckles, clearly eager. Elder Han, he subconsciously took half a step back and snorted coldly, wary. Enough. Settle down, the sectmaster finally spoke, his voice full of authority. Only then did the woman in work clothes reluctantly raise the wine flask and gulp down 2 more mouthfuls. The elders all exchanged looks. Could it be that even the sectmaster was interested in that little girl? Before I knew it, another stick of incense had passed. More than 500 people had been tested in the meantime. Finally, it was my turn. The elder slapped a hand onto my shoulder and immediately sent a thread of internal energy into my body, preparing to circulate through my meridians. But very soon, that thread of internal energy disappeared. The elder facing me furrowed his brows for the second time. Internal energy could stimulate a person's organs, meridians, and root bone. The better the root bone, the stronger the reaction to that stimulation. But this boy's body gave no reaction at all. And that would have been one thing. But his internal energy had also vanished like a mud ox entering the sea. If the elder hadn't seen the boy standing there alive in front of him, he might have thought he was testing a rock. After hesitating for a moment, the elder still wrote down my name. Li Jiwu, C grade. Go on through. I cupped my hands toward him, then passed the mountain gate with a completely normal expression. C grade? Father probably wouldn't be too happy about that. When the time came, Yingbing would have to help me smooth things over. What I said to my father didn't usually work, but what she said did. I laughed openly and bumped the shoulder of the girl beside me. Yingbing looked at my easygoing expression and thought that, all things considered, since 1 bottle of pure yang pills had helped her open her meridians half a year early, this state of mind of his was at least worthy of being pulled along a little. As for how far he could go, that would depend on his own effort. Those who climb 10 steps may enter the outer sect. Those who climb 50 steps enter the inner sect. Those who reach 80 steps become true disciples, the elder announced loudly before the ascending heaven steps. What if someone reaches the top? A confident voice asked. The elder's lips curled slightly as if he had answered this question many times before. The founding ancestor once said that whoever reaches the summit becomes the sect master's personal disciple. But throughout the history of the sect, despite the countless geniuses who have appeared, only 2 or 3 people have ever done it. Without exception, all of them had A-top aptitude. Do not aim too high and too far. That is how you will actually climb higher. Elder, what about those who are naturally stronger, or even those who have already practiced martial arts beforehand? Wouldn't they have an advantage? Someone else asked. The elder patiently replied, there is no need to worry. People around them couldn't help gasping. So fast. Murong Xiao was even faster. Why do they look so relaxed? Only a small number of people were whispering, though. Most of the candidates were gritting their teeth and climbing with everything they had. But the moment Yingbing stepped onto the ascending heaven steps, everyone's attention shifted to her without even realizing it. After all, everyone wanted to know just how far this cold, beautiful girl with top-tier aptitude could go. Feeling the faint pressure on the steps, Yingbing gave a tiny shake of her head. In her eyes, these ascending heaven steps were simply too old. If enough more time passed, they might lose their effect altogether. Her figure rose higher and higher. 10 steps, 20 steps, 30 steps. She moved as if she were walking on flat ground. The height seemed to have almost no effect on her at all, and she quickly left everyone else behind. At that point, nobody could stay calm anymore. This wasn't even about whether she could reach the top. She looked like she had come here just to break the record for the fastest summit. Yingbing kept advancing and very quickly reached the 54th step. Watching her become the center of all attention, I couldn't help sighing inside. Some people look cold on the outside but are warm inside. Some look warm outside but cold within. But someone like this ice block fiancé, cold on the outside and domineering on the inside too, was honestly a first for me. While thinking that, I finally moved as well. There was no point hiding my strength. The higher you climbed, the higher your status in the sect would be later, and the easier it would be to meet people with powerful destinies worth investing in. I still hadn't farmed enough rewards off my ice-cold fiancé yet. Besides, I also wanted to see just how far I could go myself. I'd somehow tested as only C grade, but I still had no clue what kind of level an immortal body counted for in a martial world like this. I stepped onto the stairs. Huh? This pressure was basically nothing. I tilted my head and casually took one step that carried me up 3 levels. High above, the woman in work clothes lit up with interest. Yingbing's personality suited her taste perfectly. Sujin, meanwhile, stroked his beard and fell into thought. In the letter sent earlier, his former disciple, my father, had once mentioned wanting Yingbing as his future daughter-in-law. Looking at things now, though, that future granddaughter-in-law was probably far from secure. A mere C-grade rootbone didn't look like someone who could become a true disciple at all. But then Zhejin suddenly noticed the boy on the mountain path moving as if he were flying. The woman in work clothes immediately spoke up, saying that the girl should be left to her and that she would definitely teach her well. The sect elders were speechless. They all started objecting at once, saying she spent half the day sleeping and the other half drinking, and that a perfectly good genius would be ruined in her hands. Everyone had thoughts of taking Yingbing as a disciple, but on one point they were all in total agreement. Anyone could teach her, just not the 9th peak elder. At that very moment, a clear cry rang across the sky like the call of a phoenix. Yingbing had already reached the end of the ascending heaven steps. Magpies, wild geese, swallows, and countless other birds flew in from every direction and circled obediently around her. The crowd below stood there dumbfounded, not understanding what was happening, but the upper ranks of Qingyuan's sect sensed something more. Behind Yingbing, they seemed to see the shadow of a noble and mysterious bird, exalted beyond compare. Even Shangguan Wenchang, the sect master who had remained silent the whole time, abruptly rose to his feet. He recognized the sign immediately. It was an extraordinary manifestation connected to the Taiyin Moon Phoenix body. The others on the steps couldn't see that deeper vision, but they still heard the cry that shook the heavens and saw the white birds gathering around her. Then someone suddenly shouted, "Wait, wasn't that guy only C grade?" "Yeah, how did he get above 50? "Forget 50, he's already at 80. The way I was strolling up there like I was on a morning walk looked absurdly effortless. If Yingbing's performance left people shocked and envious, then my situation left them completely confused. What kind of joke was this supposed to be? You call this C grade? Even the elders stared. One of them directly asked whether the elder who had tested my bones had made a mistake. The old woman who had examined me earlier changed expression several times before finally muttering that maybe she was getting old, and her eyes had failed her. The sect higher-ups all fell into thought. An elder of that level misjudging Rootbone wasn't impossible, but it definitely wasn't normal. While they were still talking, the number of people standing at the summit changed from 1 to 2. Yingbing's eyes flickered repeatedly. Reaching the top was never difficult in her eyes. In her past life, even complete versions of the ascending heaven steps had been climbed by many people. But among those people, there had never been this boy in front of her. My robe fluttered in the wind as I smiled and said, "What a coincidence. You're here too." I was honestly surprised myself. If I wasn't already standing on the summit, I would have thought something was wrong with the steps. But since Yingbing had already caused such a huge phenomenon, while I apparently climbed up with no flashy effect at all, the crowd got even more confused. People started buzzing nonstop. Yingbing had drawn all the birds of the sky, but I seemed to have reached the top without creating any obvious spectacle. Yet the sect records clearly stated that every person who ever reached the summit had always displayed some extraordinary sign. Unlike the others below, the higher-ups on the viewing platform had gone completely quiet, because they could see what ordinary eyes could not. In their eyes, my ascent absolutely had a phenomenon too. Behind me was the image of a person carrying all living beings on his back. That silhouette looked plain to the extreme, but also impossibly profound. On the ascending heaven steps, what I had reflected was simply myself. The elders exchanged looks and saw the same disbelief in each other's eyes. No one had expected such a thing. But one fact was beyond doubt now. This boy was anything but ordinary. Since 2 people had climbed all 100 steps, Zhuejin finally spoke up and said they should both count as true disciples. Another elder hesitated and reminded everyone that the ancestral rule said the summit climber should be a candidate for sect master, someone raised as the future inheritor of Qingyuan Mountain. How could one sect have 2 heirs? The problem was that this situation had basically never happened before. For a moment, all the elders turned toward the sect master. After a brief silence, Shangguan Wenchang made the decision. Yingbing would become the sect master's personal disciple, while the boy would become a true disciple. None of the elders found that shocking. One of the summit visions reflected a mysterious, exalted bird, while the other reflected a human being in his plainest form. The former clearly seemed to carry greater visible potential. An hour later, the time limit ended. The young climbers on the stairs all lost their energy at once. Some were overjoyed, some remained calm, and others were full of bitterness, but the result was already fixed. After the second round, only 700 or 800 people were truly left qualified to enter Qingyuan's sect. Shangguan Wenchang stepped forward, and the noisy crowd instantly fell silent. He announced that those entering the outer sect should go to the outer court affairs hall to receive their identity tokens and supplies. Those entering the inner sect could choose one peak to join, since each peak focused on different martial arts and had different strengths. They would have 3 days to learn about those peaks before deciding. Whether outer sect or inner sect, none of them were allowed to become lazy. They were all still young, and their fates were not yet set in stone. His voice carried a natural force that made people listen. At that moment, I looked toward the elders and jolted slightly, because Zhuejin was actually winking at me. So that was it. I had wondered before how some seemingly ordinary old doctor from a medical hall could casually produce pills like pure yang pills. Yingbing being taken as the sectmaster's direct disciple was no surprise to anyone, though it still shook the crowd. They had all just taken the initiation test together, and in the blink of an eye, she had already separated from them by an entire world. That was life for you. Then the sectmaster continued, and said that Li Zhiwu, Lin Jiang, and Murong Xiao also had the qualifications of true disciples, and asked whether any elder was willing to accept them. True disciples were rare, and every elder could only take up to 5. Lin Jiang was accepted very quickly. Murong Xiao even sparked competition among 3 elders before ultimately joining Elder Han He's line. While this was happening, I quietly checked both of them with my fate eye. Lin Jiang was around 16, with decent talent but an impatient nature, the kind of person who pushed too hard and could break if he wasn't careful. Still, if he realized that flaw in time, he could rise much higher. His recent thought was that now that he had become a true disciple of Qingyuan sect, he wanted a powerful weapon. Murong Xiao, also 16, had even stronger cultivation, but his bloodline was unusual. His father was human, while his mother came from a beast that had taken human form. His temperament was kind, but he suffered under the influence of his own blood. If he could properly balance those two sides, his future would be limitless. If not, he might become a disaster. His recent struggle was trying to suppress the bloodthirst buried in his instincts. I took a quiet breath after seeing that. Murong Xiao's father was seriously bold. A romance legend would probably kneel in respect. Then I realized something. Why was nobody saying anything about me? When I came back to myself, I noticed the elders looking at me with complicated expressions. Their shared problem was obvious. My aptitude seemed incredible, but how exactly were they supposed to teach someone like me? For a while, the whole place went oddly quiet. Then a lazy voice broke the silence. "Kid, would you like to join under me?" I turned and saw the woman in work clothes standing there with one hand on her waist, trying very hard to look serious and dignified. Her features were bold and beautiful, and even her loose robe couldn't hide her figure. I didn't hesitate for long and saluted. At that exact moment, Zhuejin had been about to speak, but the woman shot him a threatening look and he immediately shut up. I used my fate eye on her. Her name was Shang Wu, around 27 years old, with an extraordinary root bone related to a South Bright Fire Lotus. Her cultivation was already at the 7th heaven of the inner landscape realm. Her fate was purple. The system's evaluation was almost hilarious. You could question her character, but never question her strength. She also clearly had an unusual background. Her recent situation was that she was broke and had no money for wine, and was currently thinking about how to borrow a little more from the elders of the other peaks. She was also very interested in the sectmaster's disciple, Yingbing. No wonder the elders had all been looking so weird. No matter how I looked at it, Shangwu didn't seem like ideal teacher material. Honestly, that evaluation even made me start questioning the quality of purple fate. But purple was still the highest fate color I'd seen so far, and even if I learned nothing from her, I could still farm investment rewards. Thinking that, I relaxed. Shangwu slapped my shoulder and declared that from now on, I belonged to her. She even told me that if I got into trouble outside, I should just report her name. The force in that slap was outrageous and made me suck in a breath. From not far away, Yingbing's hand moved almost invisibly. So he had really entered Shangwu's line. Still, if he managed to learn even a fraction of Shangwu's true ability, then maybe he could at least secure a place among the younger generation of Xiang Prefecture. Of course, on the scale of the entire Eastern Wasteland, that still wouldn't count as a true Heaven's Chosen, and likely wouldn't be enough to get him onto the system rankings. With 4 true disciples appearing in a single intake, Qingyuan sect was in excellent spirits. A smiling elder took us away to complete the formal admission process. After the initiation ceremony ended, news spread through the sect like it had grown wings. 2 people had reached the summit of the ascending heaven steps in one day, something unprecedented in the history of Qingyuan sect. In the internal affairs hall on Qingyuan Mountain, disciples were already sipping tea and gossiping. They talked about how there were 4 new true disciples this year and how the girl was so beautiful she looked like a fairy. But more importantly, she had reached the summit almost effortlessly and looked like a monster among monsters. Then someone brought up the other summit climber and said that he had joined the 9th peak under Elder Shang Wu. The moment that was said, All the inner sect disciples wore the same strange expression, with even a bit of pity in their eyes. To them, that guy was done for. If not for being overshadowed by that girl, maybe he too would have been raised as a sect master seed. He had good talent, just terrible luck. While they were talking, they suddenly put down their teacups and straightened up, greeting Elder Qian respectfully. The elder nodded and said he had brought the newly admitted true disciples to collect their things, and that this month's stipends should be issued in advance according to the standards already set for each peak. His name was Qian Bufan, one of the most powerful elders in the sect, because internal affairs also meant money. This was obviously a favor, and I guessed it was mainly because of Ying Bing. Even so, I still bowed and thanked him. But Qian Bufan immediately turned aside and refused to accept my courtesy. I was confused at first, but I quickly found out why. Murong Xiao's package was announced first. A monthly stipend of 500 tiles, a forged warhammer, and 2 bottles of jade bone pills. Then Lin Jiang's. A monthly stipend of 300 taels and 2 bottles of advancement pills. Finally, when it was Ying Bing's turn, the disciple in charge grew much more respectful. As the sect master's disciple, she would receive a monthly stipend of 1,000 tiles, a top-grade cold iron sword, 2 bottles of pure yang pills, and 10 meridian cleansing herbs. Even the nearby disciples looked jealous hearing that treatment. Then the disciple added that the sect master had additional instructions for her. Ying Bing responded immediately, and the disciple nodded as if to record it. At that point, I pointed to myself and asked, "What about me?" I honestly thought they had forgotten me. The disciple looked over and said, "I was from Kunyu Peak," then handed me a very thick booklet and said this was what their peak had prepared for its true disciple. I stared at it in confusion, wondering whether this was some kind of super secret martial arts manual. But when I opened it, the first lines made my head fill with question marks. It was a debt ledger. It listed things like 3,000 taels borrowed, 90 jars of apricot blossom wine, damage caused by dismantling beast cages and letting spirit beasts escape, and losses totaling dozens of beasts. Every page was full of IOUs and unpaid accounts. Elder Qian sighed and explained that the resources for true disciples on each peak were provided by that peak itself, not by the sect as a whole. Kunyu Peak provided no resources at all. In fact, Shang Wu had even taken many advances from the Internal Affairs Hall already. He told me that when I had time, I should take that account book back to her and remind her to pay her debts. My mouth twitched. So everyone else came here to collect benefits, and I came here to inherit debt. Qian Bufan kindly added one more reminder. There probably wasn't even a residence for me on Kunyu Peak, so I'd better make plans early and build myself a straw hut or something. Materials could be requested from the Internal Affairs Hall. A straw hut? I fell into deep silence. I had never imagined that after entering Qingyuan sect and becoming a true disciple, I would end up effectively homeless. Was I some kind of fake true disciple? Then Yingbing unexpectedly spoke. She said I could stay at her place. I turned around in complete shock. Was this really the same ice block fiancé I knew? Qian Bufan instantly smiled with the expression of a delighted aunt and said that Chushui Pavilion had a wonderful environment, and the two of us staying there together would practically look like an immortal couple. I immediately shook my head and told him he was overthinking it. Qian Bufan blinked and asked if we weren't a pair. He clearly thought that in this day and age, who else of the opposite sex would live under the same roof unless their relationship was special? Before I could answer, Yingbing's voice had already sounded beside me. No. Her tone was casual, but it somehow carried a chill that made the air colder. Qian Bufan laughed awkwardly, apologized for his loose tongue, then smacked his lips like he was still a little disappointed. I gave a bitter smile and looked away from Yingbing. Was she beautiful? Using the phrase, a beauty who could topple cities wouldn't be an exaggeration, but she was too cold. Cold in personality and cold in the literal physical sense, too. Thinking that, I couldn't help sighing. Toward this childhood sweetheart of mine, pity was honestly more fitting than love. In my memories, she hadn't always been like this. She only became this way after tragedy struck her family. If I put myself in her shoes, I couldn't honestly claim I would be able to remain optimistic or gentle either. Across from me, Yingbing gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. The road of martial Dao was long and merciless. In her previous life, she had no idea how many outstanding men had pursued her. But if she had not cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires and focused entirely on swimming against the current of the martial path, she could never have reached the summit. In this life, her heart would remain just as firm. Kyushui Pavilion was located not far from Kunyu Peak. After the gate was opened, the two of us walked in one after the other. I looked around and felt very satisfied with the place. It was a well-built residence, and at the same time, I felt a little emotional. Back then, Yingbing had depended on the Li family and lived under someone else's roof. Now the roles had reversed. But when I looked back, I saw Yingbing standing there staring into the courtyard in a daze. I remarked that it looked like no one had lived here for a long time, and said we should clean it up first. I wandered around the place looking for cleaning tools, but before I found anything, Yingbing suddenly said, "The broom is under the stone bench by the flower bed." I bent down, checked, and sure enough, there really was a broom there. Then she calmly tied her long hair up with a ribbon and told me to go boil some hot water. The tone in her voice was completely natural, as if she had lived here for ages already. In one seamless move, she had become the lady of Chushui Pavilion. I clicked my tongue inside. Great, so now I'd become the hardworking little housekeeper. Even though I knew this was just how she was, I still felt a little unwilling somehow. As a man with strong self-respect, I had taken critical emotional damage. One bucket of bathwater probably won't be enough. I'll boil you some more. The next day, I got up early and went straight into the kitchen to make breakfast. During the trip here, I had been throwing money around and investing in people everywhere I went, which had earned me all kinds of weird feedback rewards. Quite a few of them were ready-to-eat foods that only needed heating up. By the time the sun had fully risen, I carried out soy milk and steamed buns. The ice block fiancé was already sitting there. Calling her beautiful didn't even begin to cover it. After breakfast, an old man arrived at Chushui Pavilion in an ancient but dignified carriage. Smiling warmly, he said he had come under the sect master's orders to escort Yingbing up the mountain from now on. King Yuan Peak had many buildings, and he was worried she might not remember the way. So this was the sect master's carriage. No wonder it looked so grand. Now this was what real true disciple treatment looked like. As for me, I'd probably have to walk up the mountain myself. After getting into the carriage, Yingbing lifted the curtain and said to me, "Before you go to Kunyu Peak, you can first prepare a pot of good wine." Then the carriage rolled away. When I finally arrived at the summit of Kunyu Peak and looked at the place I was supposedly supposed to live, the corner of my mouth twitched. There was one crude wooden hut, plus some broken walls and ruins nearby. If I didn't know this was inside Qingyuan sect, I would have thought this place had just been hit by a disaster. "Master, master?" I called twice, but no one answered, so I pushed open the door. The whole room reeked of alcohol. On the bed lay a woman sleeping spread eagle, completely unguarded, the scene still somehow full of a kind of dangerous beauty. I could only lean close to her ear and whisper, "Elder Chen came to collect the debt." That worked instantly. Shangwu shot upright, but after seeing it was me, she frowned in confusion. You're a disciple," I said helplessly. "Disciple? Oh, right, now I remember." She scratched her head as if trying to force the memory back into place, though her eyes still looked dazed. "So why are you here?" I went quiet for a moment before saying, "Now that I've entered the sect, shouldn't you teach me something?" "That actually makes sense," Shangwu muttered. "Yesterday I was indeed thinking I should teach you something. When I haven't had wine, my memory gets bad." The words had barely fallen when a soft pop sounded as a wine stopper was opened. Shangwu's nose twitched, and her whole expression changed instantly. "Green brew, 10 Mile Slope Winery's special reserve. If stored for 5 years, it turns amber and becomes a proper vintage. A 10-year one is even rarer." "Where did you get this?" She snatched the wine jar from my hand, and just the motion traced out a dangerous curve. "Your memory doesn't seem bad at all," I said, completely speechless. Shangwu wiped her mouth and said, "I remember now. Yesterday I made a bet with that old ghost Han He. He actually dared say I don't know how to teach disciples. Can I tolerate that?" In my heart I thought what he said sounded pretty accurate. After all, who else would accept a disciple and hand him a debt ledger? Shangwu then pulled out a manual with complete confidence. "This is my personal secret method. Today I'll bring you into the path." I took the booklet and looked at the title. Fireheart Lotus Method. The name alone sounded overpowered. And since even the system judged Shangwu's strength to be unquestionable, all those debts were probably earned through sheer ability. Thinking that, I felt reassured and opened the manual. A while later, I was sitting outside the hut with my mind full of question marks when the system notification suddenly sounded. "You invested 1 jar of 10-year aged wine. Reward, 10 years of martial comprehension, usable on any martial art." I immediately walked out, sat down cross-legged on the ground, and dumped all 10 years of martial insight straight into the Fireheart Lotus method. In an instant, I had cultivated it to the small success stage. The feeling of sudden enlightenment was so wonderful, it felt like flying into the clouds. I couldn't wait to begin my first real cultivation session. A strand of heat rose inside my dantian, and even the surrounding grass and trees began to stir without wind. Inside the room, the drunken Shangwu frowned in her sleep and muttered, "Unity of man and nature. Who the hell got such ridiculous luck?" At the same time, on Qingyuan Peak's training hall, several elders stood nearby with the same stunned look in their eyes. The reason they were all so shaken was the girl sitting not far away, facing the sky in meditation. A group of old men with a combined age of over 500 were all starting to question their lives. "She entered the path in 1 day?" Sujin said in disbelief. "More accurately, in a quarter of an hour," Chen Bufan corrected, sounding deeply moved. Then he turned to Han He and asked, "You cultivated this same twin origin technique too. How long did it take you back then?" Han He's mouth twitched. After a while, he answered, 1 month. Shuijin sighed solemnly. "Each generation truly brings forth its own talents. Qingyuan sect is about to rise." A crisp sound rang out as cold wind swirled around Yingbing like a vortex. "She opened another meridian." Han He's eyes widened. "At this rate, won't she connect all 12 in just a few days?" He was only half right. Yingbing truly could open 12 meridians in a few days, but she intended to connect far more than 12. The elders of Qingyuan sect were ultimately limited by their vision. The human body contained far more than just 12 main meridians that could be used as the basis of cultivation. What Yingbing wanted was to connect 24 and form a great internal cycle within her body. Once she stepped into the inner breath realm with that foundation, she would be more than 10 times stronger than normal cultivators. Even the elders could only look on with bitter smiles. The sect master had been too busy to personally instruct Yingbing, so he had specially arranged for 3 elders to help guide and advise her. But now it was obvious she didn't need them. Watching her cultivate just made them feel like they themselves were full of flaws. At that point, Suijin suddenly said, "You two stay here. I'm going to Kunyu Peak." "Why are you going there?" Hanhe asked. The moment the word Kunyu Peak came up, he couldn't help snorting coldly. Suijin replied, "Do you really feel at ease leaving a disciple in Shang Wu's hands?" Chen Bufan took a deep breath and said, "Junior brother Zhui, go quickly. If you're late, I'm afraid it'll be too late." A figure flashed through the mountains. "I need to give that grand disciple emergency aid." In only a few breaths, Suijin arrived on Kunyu Peak carrying a medicine chest. But before he even reached the top, the worry on his face turned into confusion. Something wasn't right. Someone was drawing in heaven and earth essence to cultivate. Shangwu should have still been sleeping at this hour. Since when was she practicing? Let alone reaching unity with nature. Picking up speed again, Suijin rushed onward and soon saw me sitting quietly in front of the wooden hut, so merged with the surroundings that I looked like part of nature itself. 2 more crisp sounds rang out and Suijin's mouth dropped open. After opening my meridians, I had already connected another main one. Not only had I learned the Fireheart Lotus method with 0 guidance, I had even entered a state of unity with nature. "Elder Zhui, when did you get here?" My ear twitched and I opened my eyes. "Don't get distracted talking," Suijin shouted, so anxious his beard seemed ready to stand on end. "Unity with nature is something that can't be sought, only encountered." "Unity with nature?" I sat there blankly. "But I kind of need to go to the toilet." Suijin nearly blacked out on the spot.
Was now the time for that?
At his level, he knew exactly how precious the state was. For someone in the inner landscape stage, unity with nature was practically an early experience of a higher realm. For him, even a glimpse of it could increase his chances of advancing further. Yet this brat had no idea how precious it was, and was treating it like nothing. I honestly had no idea why the old man suddenly seemed so emotionally damaged. A little earlier, I had even moved myself into the shade because the sun had been too hot, then kept cultivating, and the speed was still this absurd.
Did other people not cultivate like this?
Maybe this was one of the benefits of the banished immortal body. Then a question came to me. The Fireheart Lotus method said that opening 12 meridians and planting 12 lotus seeds within them counted as complete success. But why did I feel that 12 was nowhere near the limit? I could clearly sense that the 12 main meridians were far from my body's maximum. My body felt like a bottomless abyss. Opening the first and second meridians didn't even count as the true beginning. In the end, I could only decide to take it one step at a time. Foundations were important. Since I was cultivating, I wanted to cultivate it to perfection. So I closed my eyes and entered cultivation again. Meanwhile, Suijin stormed over and kicked open the wooden door. Seeing Shangwu still sleeping like the world had ended, the veins on his forehead jumped wildly. He immediately pulled out a stick of awakening incense from his medicine chest and waved it under her nose. Shangwu sneezed, her elegant face scrunching up in displeasure. Having been disturbed twice in a row, she clenched her fists with a dangerous look. But after seeing it was the famously good-natured Shui Jin, she only said impatiently, "Old Shui, you'd better have a reason. Your disciple is outside in unity with nature. How are you still sleeping?" Shui Jin snapped. Shangwu tilted her head. "Are you drunk, or am I?" She clearly thought he was speaking nonsense. "Why don't you go outside and see for yourself?" Shujin was too lazy to argue further and walked out. Still half-dazed, Shangwu scratched her head and followed his gaze out the door. The moment she looked, the last traces of drunkenness vanished from her eyes. Then my system notifications started popping up again. "Congratulations, host. By displaying unity with nature, you caused Shuijin to gain insight." "Congratulations, host. By displaying unity with nature, you caused Shangwu to gain insight." Investment feedback. 3 jugs of Icefire wine. Investment feedback. 20 years of martial comprehension. The Icefire wine was described as a body-tempering treasure. Drinking it would subject the body to alternating extremes of freezing and burning, making it a holy grade item for strengthening the flesh. Watching me cultivate could count as an investment too? These rewards were practically free loot. I immediately decided not to show the Icefire wine to my master for the time being. Based on what I had seen of her so far, if I took out alcohol, not a drop would be left for me. And I had just been wondering how to temper my body anyway, so this stuff was exactly what I needed. I cultivated for about 2 hours, but in the end I really couldn't hold it anymore. I didn't feel any of the muscle soreness or exhaustion the martial manual described. No, the real issue was my bladder. So I cut off my draw on heaven and earth energy, patted my clothes, and stood up. The first thing I saw was Juejin snapping out of his daze with obvious reluctance, then looking at me with endless emotion. "I owe you a favor," he said seriously. At his age, his bottleneck was already as solid as iron. Advancing even a single step further was incredibly difficult. so observing unity with nature had benefited him greatly. You overpraise me, Elder Shui, I said politely, cupping my hands. My father often mentioned you back at home. Shuijin stroked his beard and sighed. Good that he still remembers this old man. That child Li Delong was truly a pity. If not for what happened to him, he would likely be an inner sect steward by now. I seized the moment and replied, Everyone has their fate. Father always said surviving it all was thanks to Elder Shu's intervention. If Father hadn't been injured and returned home, and if he hadn't met Mother on the way, then I wouldn't even exist. Sometimes loss in one place becomes gain in another. I was very good at flattering elders. Sujin's gaze toward me instantly became even more approving. This kid didn't seem anything like the unruly troublemaker Li Delong had described in his letters. Then again, fathers probably judged sons more harshly. The atmosphere between the old man and the young man was just right, when suddenly I smelled a heavy waft of alcohol. And then my neck tightened. Shangwu had slung an arm around her precious disciple's neck and was declaring ownership with full vigilance. This is my disciple. You old man, don't even think about poaching him. I'd like to, Suijin said irritably, but I don't have any disciple slots left. Looking at the noisy Shangwu, he couldn't help feeling a little worried. This grand disciple was clearly excellent. Would Shangwu end up leading him astray? As if reading his thoughts, Shangwu suddenly nodded with a serious face and said, Disciple, if you want to verify your martial arts or find people to spar with, you can go check out the martial practice hall at the foot of the mountain. If you just want to learn some basic techniques, that place is enough. I was speechless. So she really was too lazy to teach, wasn't she? Still, since I already had a cultivation method, I did want to learn some combat arts, and the martial practice hall would also be a good place to see whether there were any investment targets worth noticing. So it wasn't a bad suggestion. At the martial practice hall, the teaching session for the day had already ended. Groups of outer sect disciples were all practicing on their own, sweating heavily. A blue-robed outer sect steward raised his brows and said to an inner sect disciple nearby, Junior Brother Wang, your cousin has trained the Six Harmonies fist pretty well. He's opened his meridians too, so he's not bad at all. The inner sect disciple, Wang Hao, smiled and said that his cousin Wang Hu had shown talent in fist techniques since childhood and had even picked up a few moves from his uncle before entering the sect. Then he turned his head and glanced at a certain young man in the crowd with open contempt. That youth had plain features, but there was a hard stubbornness in his eyes as he practiced with complete focus. Wang Hao sneered that Wang Hu's talent was nothing like that trash's. He and Xiaoqin had entered the inner sect in the same batch once, yet Xiaoqin had only grown worse the more he trained, to the point his ki and blood had nearly fallen back to the level of someone who had only just opened his meridians. It was at that moment that I arrived in true disciple robes. Everyone in the hall immediately stopped and stared, confused. Why had a true disciple come to the outer sect practice hall? The blue-robed steward stood up politely and introduced himself as Hei Hongfeng, then asked what I needed. I cleared my throat and returned the courtesy. Senior brother He, I came to learn some basic fist and kick martial arts. He Hongfeng's face filled with question marks. A true disciple had come to the outer hall to learn beginner moves. Was this a joke? So he asked whether the elders knew about this. I nodded and said my master was sleeping, but Elder Zhui had sent me. Also, my master was Elder Shangwu. The moment he heard that, He Hongfeng understood everything. Reasonable. The expressions of everyone around the hall turned strange. A true disciple reduced to learning martial arts in the outer hall could only mean he wasn't favored at all. Among the crowd, the young man named Xiaoqin let out a faint sigh. In that regard, his own circumstances were no different. I asked whether true disciples weren't allowed to come to the outer practice hall. He Hongfeng replied that the rules didn't forbid it, but the basic fist lesson for today had already ended. If I still wanted to learn, I could ask the inner sect senior brother who had taught today's class. He was only responsible for guiding outer disciples in opening meridians and refining ki, so it wasn't technically impossible. Following He Hongfeng's gaze, I saw Wang Hao calmly drinking tea. Without even lifting his head, Wang Hao said coldly, The martial practice hall has its rules. I only teach outer sect disciples for 1 hour each day. Since you came late, I can't break the rules for anyone. Then he lifted his head and pretended to only now realize I was a true disciple. Oh, you're a true disciple? If you insist on breaking the rules, I suppose I could make a special exception and teach you privately. Those words sounded harmless on the surface, but they were actually poisonous. If I said yes now, it would make me the one breaking rules and demanding special treatment. Before that, everyone had felt repeating the lesson once wouldn't be a big deal. But after Wang Hao framed it that way, it suddenly sounded unfair. Right on cue, Wang Hu chimed in and acted as support. So what if you're a true disciple? If you come to the outer hall, you follow the outer hall's rules. I didn't argue. Then watching others practice doesn't break the rules, right? He Hongfeng smiled and said that was naturally allowed. So I nodded and walked into the hall looking around. Very soon my eyes locked onto the Xiaoqin standing in the corner. Wang Hao smirked. Wang Hu nearly laughed out loud. Watching someone practice and learning from that alone, who did this guy think he was? And of all people to learn from, he had picked the outer sect's famously useless Xiaoqin. I first offered a salute and politely asked, Senior brother, would it be convenient for me to watch you practice? Xiaoqin said in a dull voice, If you want to watch, then watch. I can't guarantee you'll learn anything. I smiled gently and said, Senior brother Xiao, just practice as usual. No need to mind me. His eyes grew complicated. A true disciple who didn't put on airs and who treated him, an outer disciple, with basic respect. It was something he had rarely experienced after all the cold looks he had received. At last, he felt a trace of genuine respect from someone. Junior brother, this is the Six Harmonies fist. I'll start from the beginning. Watch carefully. Xiaoqin deliberately slowed down. While demonstrating each move in detail, he also took care to explain the principles behind the technique. As I watched, I grew more and more curious. This senior brother Xiao had a very high level of understanding of the Six Harmonies fist. It didn't feel like the level of an outer disciple at all. Before long, I had already memorized most of it and casually asked for his name. Xiaoqin, he replied after stopping his movements. Xiao. That surname immediately set off my novel reader instincts. It practically had definitely not ordinary written all over it. So I opened my fade eye and looked at him. Name Xiaoqin, age 18. Root bone, none. Realm of first entering Qi blood realm, fate, purple. Evaluation. Though his root bone is ordinary, his comprehension is excellent, and his temperament is resilient. He appears simple and honest on the outside, but hides great promise within. He will bloom late, but one day he will carve out his own world. Recent encounter carries one treasure, the 7-star ancient jade. This treasure is extremely old and requires absorbing a large quantity of Qi and blood to activate, causing Xiaoqin's realm to continuously fall from the 10-vein stage of the Qi blood realm. I was stunned for a moment after reading it. Senior brother Xiaoqin was actually Purple Fate? I really hadn't expected that. He was only an outer disciple and looked completely unremarkable. If not for his strong fist technique and that suspiciously protagonist-like surname grabbing my attention, I definitely would have missed him. At this rate, maybe in the future I should just search for investment targets by surname. Anyone with surnames like Xiao or Ye should probably get a closer look. Just as my thoughts were churning, Xiaoqin frowned and glanced toward Wang Hu in the distance. Junior brother, you should leave early. Why? I asked, puzzled. Xiaoqin's face darkened. There's a rule in the sect's martial practice hall. Disciples are allowed to challenge one another to spar. Once challenged, the other side cannot refuse. I raised a brow. You mean Wang Hu is going to deliberately come challenge me in a moment? Xiaoqin sighed and nodded. With that steward's senior brother watching, it won't become anything too serious. At worst, you'll suffer some minor injuries and pain. From the sound of it, he had clearly suffered through this kind of thing more than once. I only smiled. I didn't really take the matter to heart. Xiaoqin frowned, probably thinking I was relying on my true disciple status and assuming Wang Hu wouldn't dare go too far. Right then, over in the distance, Wang Hu cracked his knuckles and shoved an outer disciple, ordering him to fight. The outer disciple grit his teeth and accepted. 3 seconds later, he was flat on the ground, clutching his stomach in pain. If you're weak, then practice more. Scram, Wang Hu said before turning back toward me. Almost forgot there's also this noble true disciple here. Come on, let me see what's so special about a true disciple. I looked at the aggressive Wang Hu without the slightest panic. After all, I could instantly dump my martial comprehension into the Six Harmonies fist at any time. The only question was how many years I should add. 20 years? Would that be too much? Would I accidentally beat someone to death? Before I could decide, a branch carrying icy killing intent sliced through the air. Wang Hu's face changed dramatically. He dodged on instinct, but he was still too slow. The branch sliced his neck open, and blood instantly poured out. Everyone swallowed hard. Even standing far away, they felt a chill run down their backs. At the entrance of the martial practice hall stood Yingbing, expression as cold as frost, face calm and emotionless. That strike had clearly come from her hand. She had casually picked up a branch and thrown it, yet still wounded Wang Hu that badly. Wang Hu turned pale and said in a trembling voice, "She wanted to kill me!" Wang Hao immediately put on a righteous face and demanded, "Junior sister Yingbing, how can fellow disciples try to kill one another so casually? You'd better give me an explanation." He was completely ignored. Yingbing looked only at me. "Why are you here?" I asked, surprised. "I happened to pass by on the way back from the scripture pavilion." Then her brows tightened slightly. "You opened your meridians?" "I did," I said. "Just not like you. You even learned swordsmanship already." I was curious and a little shocked. That branch strike she had just thrown was definitely not something a beginner who had only recently opened her meridians should be capable of. The ice block fiancé had probably already opened at least one more main meridian. A red fate really was terrifying. She was almost catching up to someone cheating with the system. "Come back to Qushui Pavilion," Yingbing said. She didn't wait for my response and simply turned to leave. I glanced over at the stunned Xiaoqin and decided it wasn't urgent. He wasn't going anywhere. I could always invest in him tomorrow. Not far away, Wang Hao's face had already darkened so much it seemed water might drip from it. "Junior sister Yingbing, you just nearly killed my cousin. Even if you're a true disciple, you can't behave so recklessly." Yingbing paused. She seemed to find this buzzing fly a little annoying. Turning her head slightly, she said flatly, "When I kill people, there is no nearly." Then she walked out. Along the way, not a single outer disciple dared meet her eyes. Wang Hao was left choking on his words, his expression shifting again and again. Her cold response had genuinely planted fear in his heart. So instead, he turned on He Hongfeng. Senior brother He, you just watched that happen? He Hongfeng smiled and replied, Junior sister Yingbing didn't break any rules. Your cousin was shouting quite energetically, so he obviously isn't seriously injured. Besides, he said he wanted to challenge a true disciple. Well, the true disciple came. He Hongfeng wasn't stupid. Even if Yingbing had torn the martial practice hall apart, he would still have to help smooth things over. Furious, Wang Hao shouted after me from behind, Coward! Hiding behind a woman. If you dare come to the martial practice hall again, I'll make you regret it. She can't protect you every day. Then he noticed Xiaoqin in the corner shaking his head and smiling faintly. Wang Hao instantly exploded. You trash, how dare you laugh at me? You were the one teaching him fist techniques just now, weren't you? Since you're so good at teaching, back at the kitchen door I asked, what do you want to eat today? King Yuan sect naturally had a dining hall, but since I could keep farming rewards from the ice block fiancé through all 3 daily meals, I was more than happy to cook for her myself. Yingbing didn't even turn her head. Anything is fine. I have no particular desire for the pleasures of food. You don't need to waste effort on it, I said confidently. That's only because you haven't eaten truly great food before. I'm not bragging, but if I cook seriously, it'll be one of a kind under heaven. Among the white grade feedback rewards I had gotten were several seasonings this world didn't even have. And I even had a hot pot base I'd been wanting to use for a long time. Yingbing said nothing, and I couldn't tell whether she had listened. At that moment, someone called from outside, Senior Sister Yingbing, are you here? When I went out, I found an outer sect steward standing there with several large bundles. They were filled with different kinds of exotic beast meat. According to him, eating them was highly nourishing to qi and blood. This too was part of the treatment given to the sect master's personal disciple. He introduced 2 of the meats in particular as products raised by the sect's spirit beast peak. Iron bone ox, greenbell fish, and rock goat. Beef, mutton, and fish all at once. Just thinking about turning all that into hot pot made me start drooling. Half an hour later, a rich, spicy fragrance drifted through the courtyard. I sat in front of the stove. Part 4. While I was thinking things over, I suddenly remembered something important. Didn't senior brother Xiaoqin have that 7-star ancient jade? Because of that treasure, his cultivation had been steadily falling. It needed a huge amount of vital energy to activate, and it had basically been draining him dry the whole time. If that was the case, then the black gold medicine I had should be exactly what he needed to solve the problem. Xiaoqin had purple fate. The reward feedback from investing in him would definitely be worth far more than a single piece of black gold. After that, I spent another 10 years worth of martial insight and pushed the 6 Harmonies fist all the way to great mastery. Then I sat cross-legged and began circulating the Fireheart Lotus method again. Outside in the courtyard, Yingbing stood upright, preparing to practice swordsmanship. Her brows moved slightly. This fiancé of hers could actually draw in heaven and earth essence while cultivating. That definitely didn't seem like a method Shangwu would have taught him. It felt more like the sign of some special physique. Yingbing was a little surprised, but only for a moment. Then she calmed down again. What kind of physique he had wasn't important. If even he himself didn't know, then it probably wasn't strong enough to matter. At the very least, it meant he had never been listed on the 9 heavens and 10 earths rankings of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion in his previous life. In any case, it couldn't compare to her own 10 extreme body. She practiced for another 2 hours, and the familiar icy aura spread from her once more. By the time she sat down on the bed, I came in carrying a copper basin. Yingbing, exotic beast meat needs to be kept cold, so I'm leaving it in your room. I set the covered basin of beast meat in the corner, and on my way out, even helped put out the lamp. If this had been before, Yingbing probably would have thrown the basin right back out. But today's hot pot had been so fresh and delicious that the taste still lingered on the tip of her tongue. If the meat spoiled, then there would be no more hot pot tomorrow. Gradually, Yingbing fell asleep. Her brows tightened slightly, but not because of the freezing torment in her body this time. She was dreaming. In the dream, she saw fragments of her former life when she had stood high above all others. Scenes flashed one after another in chaos. Princess, I know the people of your palace are forbidden from touching love, so please cripple my cultivation. Master while wandering the world. I met the one I love. Ha ha ha, Yingbing. So you don't even know what love is. How pitiful. The broken images kept surfacing, and her frown deepened. The next day, Xiaoqin limped into the martial practice hall. His face was pale and his aura was weak. He was obviously injured. The disciples nearby couldn't help whispering among themselves. Xiaoqin really dared to come again today? He had been beaten so badly yesterday, and his injuries clearly hadn't healed yet. In the past, he could have beaten Wang Hu senseless with one hand. So what exactly had happened to him? If things kept going like this for another half year, he might even be expelled from Qingyuan sect. Their tone carried both gossip and pity. But the moment they saw Wang Hu and Wang Hao walk in together, everyone shut their mouths. Wang Hu grinned when he saw Xiaoqin. You useless trash still dared show up today? Good. I like stubborn bones that refuse to cry until they see the coffin. Xiaoqin ignored him completely and just kept practicing his fist form one motion at a time despite his injuries. In his heart, He thought that I probably hadn't come today. Since he had warned me yesterday, I likely listened and stayed away. Then my voice rang out. Senior brother Xiao, you're injured? Xiaoqian froze and turned around in surprise. Everyone else was stunned too. I had really come back. Didn't I hear Wang Hu's threat yesterday? If I dared come again, he would definitely make me pay. Sure, I was a true disciple, and my talent had to be amazing, but I had only just entered the sect and barely touched martial arts at all. Was I here because I thought running away from an outer disciple would be too humiliating? If I got beaten flat in public, wouldn't that be even more embarrassing? Wang Hu's eyes narrowed at once. Good, very good. Looks like you think I wouldn't dare ask a true disciple for pointers. His aura turned dangerous. Toward Xiaoqin, he was mostly playful and cruel. Toward me, though, he clearly hated me to the bone. Wang Hao casually added, "Don't do anything outside the rules." Wang Hu bared his teeth in a grin. The meaning was obvious. As long as it stayed within the rules, he could do whatever he wanted. He Hongfeng frowned, clearly annoyed that Wang Hu was starting trouble again, but as long as no rules were broken, he couldn't openly interfere. The outer disciples all began practicing their fist forms again. Wang Hao was even teaching some of the newer disciples the 6 harmonies fist. From his movements, it was obvious that he had several years of real skill in it. Xiaoqin looked at me with deep seriousness and said, "You shouldn't have come." I smiled casually. "You got beaten yesterday and still came today too." Xiaoqin sighed. "I have my own reason for needing to come." "So do I answered. That left him speechless. Even though we hadn't known each other long, he could tell I wasn't the type to chase pride or force myself into danger over face. So why had I really come? "Senior brother Xiao, take this. Consider it repayment for teaching me yesterday." I pulled out a jade box and handed it over. Xiaoqin began to say that the 6 harmonies fist wasn't some divine art worth such repayment, but then his pupils suddenly shrank. He recognized what was inside at once. It was black gold, a precious medicine treasure. I raised one finger to my lips, telling him to keep quiet. Xiaoqin hurriedly lowered his voice. "Junior brother Li, I can't accept this. And a treasure like this works wonders no matter what martial art it's used for. You should keep it for yourself." My smile became more earnest. I had clearly seen the desire flash through his eyes just now, but he had forced himself to suppress it. Not only did he refuse it, he had even reminded me of its value in case I didn't understand. This guy was worth befriending. Still, Xiaoqin remained firm. He said it was far too precious. So I changed my wording and told him to take it as a loan if that made him feel better. Back when he still had talent, he had friends in Qingyuan sect too. But after he lost that halo, fell from the inner sect, and was pushed down into the outer sect, those so-called friends had all disappeared. Forget helping him in the snow. Most were already kind enough if they simply didn't kick him while he was down. "Take it, senior brother Xiao. Your situation needs it," I urged him again. This time, Xiaoqin didn't launch into any long speech of gratitude, nor did he ask why I was willing to believe he might repay me someday. He only clenched his fist hard in salute, eyes full of determination. I will never forget today's kindness. I patted him on the shoulder and laughed. "Good. Then when I need your help later, I won't be polite." Looking at his expression, I had a feeling that if I really asked for help in the future, this guy would risk his life without even blinking. One investment could buy the friendship of a future powerhouse and also trigger system feedback. This deal was absurdly good. People always said that more friends meant more roads. If I kept investing like this and all these people grew stronger later, then wouldn't I become the most connected man in all Great U? For a moment, my thoughts ran wild, and some classic, overpowered return home scene flashed through my head. A true disciple of Qingyuan sect goes home and finds his father living in a doghouse. Then, with one command, 10,000 experts rip through the sky to answer his call. Fine then. From now on, call me the holder of the face fruit. Xiaoqin still wanted to keep teaching me the 6 harmonies fist, but I shook my head and declined for now. Instead, I sat to the side and checked my system reward. Investment successful, 1 piece of black gold. Feedback reward, extreme weapon body. The description said that the extreme weapon body used murderous edge and soldierly force to temper an undefeated body. Not only would it make the flesh incomparably powerful, but any weapon used by its owner would also gain greatly increased power. So it was actually a body-tempering martial art, and it also improved affinity with weapons. I decided immediately that I would cultivate it. The only problem was where inside the sect, I was supposed to find a place rich in sharp military aura. Before I knew it, the teaching portion in the martial practice hall had ended, and the free practice period had begun. That also meant sparring was now allowed. Wang Hu cracked his knuckles and walked over with a sinister grin. "True disciple Li, today there's no woman here to protect you, right?" He Hongfeng immediately sensed something wrong, but before he could stop it, Wang Hao pressed him down with a hand. "Junior brother Wang, if something really happens, neither of us can bear the responsibility," he Hongfeng said heavily. Wang Hao only narrowed his eyes and sneered. "Relax, my cousin knows his limits. He's only in the Qi blood realm anyway. If anything goes too far, you can stop it instantly. Since it's within the rules, don't interfere." He Hongfeng hesitated, then gave up. Thinking about it, he did have enough control that nothing truly disastrous should happen under his watch. Just then, Xiaoqian moved first. He actually stepped forward and started walking directly toward Wang Hu, clearly planning to accept the fight before I could. Senior brother Xiao really was straightforward to a fault, but I was faster. To Wang Hu, all he saw was a fist rapidly enlarging in his vision. Almost no outer disciple in the room had time to react. By the time they came back to themselves, a dull bang had already sounded. Wang Hu staggered backward and then dropped flat onto the ground. The shock on his face hadn't even had time to disappear before the pain in his lower body hit so hard he could barely breathe. I looked at him calmly. You're too weak. Sparring with you probably wouldn't teach me anything? Xiao Qin beside me was left speechless. This was the Six Harmonies fist, but something about this scene was deeply wrong. I had only learned the fist yesterday. Where had that kind of power come from? For a moment, the entire hall went dead silent. The outer disciples all looked as if they hadn't woken up yet. A fist technique learned yesterday had just beaten Wang Hu, one of the tyrants of the martial practice hall. Were all true disciples this ridiculous? Wang Hao immediately rushed over to Wang Hu, sent inner breath into him to stabilize his qi and blood, and his face darkened to the extreme. Then he stood and said coldly, "Since true disciple Li thinks so little of sparring with outer disciples, then why not exchange a few moves with me?" He Hongfeng's voice turned sharp at once. Wang Hao, that breaks the rules. The outer disciples nearby couldn't hold back anymore either. When Wang Hu bullied them, Wang Hao never said a word. So it was only fine as long as Wang Hu won? Wang Hao replied, "Then I won't use inner breath. I'll suppress my realm to the same qi blood level." An inner disciple asking a true disciple for pointers is still within the rules, even if this reaches my master. He gave He Hongfeng no face at all. He Hongfeng's expression turned uglier, but then he seemed to think of something and gave a cold laugh instead. "If you won't regret it, then fine. Junior brother Li, what do you say? If you must fight, that's acceptable too." I narrowed my eyes. Since he was suppressing himself to the same realm, then maybe it really was worth trying. During that last actual exchange, a strange battle intent had already started rising in my chest, and now, with more time passing, that fighting spirit wasn't fading at all. It was burning hotter and hotter like a prairie fire. "All right," I said softly. Everyone's hearts shook. I had accepted. I had only been in martial arts for 2 days at most. Then I turned and said, "Senior brother Xiao, step back a little." But when I looked beside me, Xiao Qin was already gone. Strange. He didn't seem like the type to flee when things turned dangerous. Wang Hao saw that too and sneered, "You stood up for him, and now he's already run away?" "Since I don't want others saying I bully the weak, I'll let you move first," Wang Hao said. But before his last word fully landed, my fist was already there. Against someone looking for trouble, I had no intention of being polite. I aimed straight under his ribs with a heavy strike. Wang Hao's brow jumped, but he wasn't shaken by my momentum. Our fists collided. His arm went numb from the impact, but he didn't retreat. Confident in his combat experience, he immediately launched a counterattack. What he hadn't expected was that my fighting style was unexpectedly vicious and mature. I completely ignored the straight punch aimed at my chest and instead stepped right into him, bringing my arm down like a steel whip toward his shoulder. The force of the Six Harmonies fist flowed without pause, one movement feeding the next. Small success? Wang Hao's heart trembled. But by then he could no longer stop his own strike, so he hardened his resolve and pushed through. That punch had already reached the limit allowed for this level. He knew the Six Harmonies fist too, and he sneered inwardly. Then my heavy blow landed on his shoulder, only to feel as if some invisible force was holding it back by a hair. At the same time, his fist struck me and forced me back several steps. I exhaled and immediately saw through it. He was pretending to suppress himself, but in reality he had already used inner breath. Still, I didn't say anything. The battle intent in my eyes only rose higher. Again, Wang Hao was surprised by my toughness, and his killing intent climbed as well. Then suddenly his pupils contracted. My fierce fist had actually punched through that thin layer of inner breath and landed solidly on his shoulder. Wang Hao staggered backward, his face turning pale and ugly. He Hongfeng stared in a daze. Six Harmonies fist. Great mastery? The Six Harmonies fist was basic, yes, but that didn't mean it was simple. In fact, the more basic a thing was, the easier it was to learn and the harder it was to master. Every bit of progress required long grinding practice. Wang Hao had suffered a huge loss, but instead of backing down, his whole body trembled in rage. "Wang Hao, what are you doing?" He Hongfeng shouted. But before the words had fully fallen, Wang Hao had already lunged forward, his palm carrying a strand of dark force straight toward my dantian. He clearly wanted to cripple me. Then in the next instant, Wang Hao flew backward like a cannonball. Under the terrifying force that hit him, cracking sounds exploded through his whole body. He Hongfeng's hair stood on end as he turned his head stiffly. Shangwu was standing there. I instantly understood. No wonder Xiao Qian had disappeared earlier. He hadn't run at all. He had gone straight to move and rescue soldiers for me. Smart. Senior brother Xiao. I pulled back my gaze and looked at Wang Hao in the distance. Heaven knew how many bones he had broken. He was foaming at the mouth and barely breathing. Even if he didn't die, he was finished for a while. I asked quietly, "Master, will there be trouble if you hit him that hard?" Shangwu narrowed her eyes. Of course there will be trouble. Anyone who dares touch someone under my protection deserves it. An inner disciple attacking a true disciple doesn't happen without someone behind him. You there, what's your name? He Hongfeng was sweating so hard his legs were shaking. This disciple is He Hongfeng. Everyone in the older generation knew one thing very clearly. In Qingyuan sect, you could offend the sect master if you really had to, but under no circumstances should you provoke the ninth elder. Shangwu lazily sat herself down in a chair and said, Go to Divine Weapon Peak and tell Fu Tu to get over here. If I don't see him within a quarter of an hour, I'll personally pay them a visit. He Hongfeng ran so fast it looked like a fierce beast was chasing him. I had been worried that once the little one got beaten, the old one would come too, and then my master would get blamed. But from Shang Wu's attitude, she was clearly planning to drag the old one over and beat him too if necessary. Xiaoqin coughed lightly and said in a low voice, I heard Divine Weapon Peak used to be very tall. It was only slightly shorter than the main peak. I froze and looked into the distance. Divine Weapon Peak was clearly the shortest among all the peaks now, and the top even looked like a whole chunk had been torn away. Xiaoqin continued later. Elder Han. He and Elder Shangwu had a conflict. Elder Shangwu punched the peak top off. I stared at my beautiful master, who was now crossing her legs and drinking tea with the corners of her mouth lifted as though remembering something pleasant. The whole thing felt absurd and surreal. Good disciple, come here. You're not hurt, right? Shangwu called me over with a smile. I walked to her side, but before I could feel touched, she added, When Fu Tu gets here, we need to extort him properly. You've got confidence, right? I went speechless. So that was why she had come so quickly. Over at Divine Weapon Peak, He Hongfeng stumbled in and shouted for Fu Tu to hurry over. Shangwu had said that if he didn't arrive within a quarter of an hour, she would storm the peak herself. The moment those words came out, sweat appeared on the faces of all the burly men in the forging yard. Clearly they remembered some traumatic event. They all turned to look at Fu Tu. His facial muscles twitched hard. The forging hammer slipped from his hand and hit the ground. Elder Han. He slapped the table and rose in anger, saying that Shangwu was acting as if Divine Weapon Peak had no one left to defend it. But despite his rage, the other men all lowered their heads and pretended to be very busy. In the end, Fu Tu could only leave first. After he went, Han He asked what had happened. He Hongfeng explained everything in detail. Han He was furious. An older disciple bullying a newer disciple in sparring was already shameless enough, but to do that and still lose was simply humiliating. Worse, Shangwu was the kind of person who could make trouble out of nothing. If she actually had a valid reason now, then who knew how big this would get? Then Han He caught one detail. You said that kid forced Wang Hao to use inner breath? He Hongfeng nodded and added that Wang Hao had actually been secretly using a little inner breath even before, and after suffering under Great Mastery Six Harmony's fist, he had finally become furious and lost control. Han He's eyes flickered. Great Mastery in the Six Harmony's fist. Opening meridians in one day. Based on just those 2 points, even if that boy was slightly below Yingbing, the gap wasn't far. The ascending heaven steps truly never judged wrong. Perhaps that boy's special physique was reflected in martial comprehension, which was why his progress was so monstrous. The thought of such a promising seedling entering Shangwu's line made Han He's head hurt. If the kid merely learned martial arts, maybe it was fine. But if he also picked up all of that woman's bad habits, then it would be a disaster. Back at the martial practice hall, Fu Tu arrived and immediately saw his disciple embedded in the wall, half dead, while Shangwu sat above everyone else drinking tea like a queen. Fu Tu took a deep breath, suppressing his rage. Elder Shang, what is the meaning of injuring my disciple like this? Shangwu's brows shot up and her voice became even louder than his. He made the first move. Then she grabbed my arm and pointed dramatically at the bruise on my hand. If I hadn't arrived in time, my gifted precious disciple would have been destroyed by yours. I coughed awkwardly and tried to pull my hand back but couldn't. Master, the bruise on my hand came from hitting him. If she had arrived any later, it probably would have faded on its own. With a wave of his sleeve, Fu Tu pulled Wang Hao out of the wall from a distance. It was only a spar between fellow disciples. Elder Shang, you've gone too far, Shangwu snorted. He's responsible for guiding newer disciples in fist techniques, isn't he? Maybe he was just teaching through sparring. So using inner breath on a new disciple also counts as guidance? Then she turned to me and said angrily, Disciple, what do our sect rules say? I answered at the perfect moment, Disciples who maim fellow disciples can be executed on the spot. Fu Tu looked at the unconscious Wang Hao with fury. Wang Hao had bullied a disciple who had only entered the sect 1 day ago and still needed inner breath to do it. Now the charge of harming a fellow disciple had fallen on his head, and even if Fu Tu broke his teeth over it, he could only swallow the blood. Yet amid his anger, he also glanced at me without making it obvious. He knew exactly how capable Wang Hao was. If Wang Hao couldn't suppress me without using inner breath, then this new true disciple was no small matter. In the end, Fu Tu forced himself to say, Then many thanks to Elder Shang for disciplining my disciple on my behalf. Farewell. He picked Wang Hao up and turned to leave. He had only taken 2 steps when a killing intent locked onto him so tightly that the hairs on the back of his neck rose. Shangwu spat a tea leaf back into her cup and said lazily, Your divine weapon peak still owes me an explanation? Then she began naming compensation like it was nothing. Bring me 10,000 caddies of cold iron, 1,000 caddies of red gold, and 10 caddies of star metal. Not one tael less, or don't even think about leaving this martial practice hall. Everyone present clicked their tongues. That was basically 10 years worth of Divine Weapon Peaks production. Even Han He might not be able to produce that much. Veins bulged on Futu's forehead. Shangwu, don't push people too far. Shangwu laughed coldly. And if I do? A blazing aura spread through the hall, so oppressive that breathing became difficult. For a moment, I almost felt as if I could see a fire lotus blooming from her body, burning eternally. Futu's imposing manner collapsed immediately. If it had been anyone else, he would have believed they wouldn't dare attack inside the sect. But Shangwu was different. When this woman went mad, even the sect master gave her room. Realizing the atmosphere had gone dangerous, I hurriedly stepped in as peacemaker. Elder Futu is only a steward of Divine Weapon Peak. Asking for that much really is impossible for him. This disciple wasn't truly injured either. Why not reduce the compensation a bit? Shangmu gave a cold snort. That's true enough. Disciple, then tell me what compensation would satisfy you. I cleared my throat, took up a brush, and quickly wrote out a list. When Futu looked at it, most of the items were expensive wines Shangwu liked, along with some other precious odds and ends. It would still hurt badly, but it was nowhere near as ridiculous as her previous demand. Seeing the master and disciple playing off each other, Futu's face shifted several times. But in the end, he could only swallow the loss. That's better, Shangwu said. You should have been this sensible from the beginning. Her terrifying aura vanished instantly. Only after Futu snorted coldly and left did she finally beam in satisfaction. Part 5. The way Master looked at me no longer resembled the look one gives a warm little cotton jacket. Helpless, I said, actually, I only wanted some lean meat to roast. Roast meat? Shangwu's eyes lit up at once. You can cook too? Of course, I said confidently. In Ziyang Prefecture, if I say I'm number 1, nobody dares say they're number 2. With modern seasonings in hand, I really was that confident. Not long afterward, Master and I arrived at a huge cavern. On the left and right sides of the cave were 2 rivers, one blazing hot and the other so cold it pierced to the bone. The water from both had been diverted into channels that flowed into the courtyard, where a group of blacksmiths worked with their heads down in focused labor. That's Shenfeng Cave, Shangwu said. Since she was in a good mood, she was willing to explain a few things to her clueless new disciple. It existed before Qingyuan sect was even founded. Inside are piles of broken copper and rotten iron. Back then, I killed an assassin from Drizzle Tower, and I tossed his sword in there too. Old man Han He says the place operates by using icy murderous edge. I was instantly moved. Icy murderous edge? Then wasn't Shenfeng Cave the perfect place to cultivate the extreme weapon body? Those aren't broken scraps, Han He said as he approached with his hands behind his back, looking displeased. Shang Wu, do not insult the precious weapons of my Divine Weapon Peak's forebears. Shang Wu didn't waste words with him. She stretched out a hand. Where's the stuff? As soon as she said that, Futu dragged out a cart. Shang Wu narrowed her beautiful eyes. Old man Han He, rare to see you so straightforward. Fine, we'll consider this matter settled. Then my system prompt appeared. Successfully assisted Shang Wu in extorting compensation. Investment feedback, 3 jars of ice fire wine, 2 bottles of 6-pattern clear heart pills, and 10 gin of star metal. The clear heart pill could calm the mind and suppress distracting thoughts to a certain degree. Each pill would last for 2 hours, and only 1 could be taken per day. Star metal was a supreme forging material. Add even a trace of it to an ordinary weapon, and that weapon could cut iron like mud. It was an essential material for forging divine weapons. I was delighted. I hadn't expected helping Master shake someone down would count as an investment too. Hanha gave a cold snort. This old man would never lose both face and stake. I only hope that when you lose later, Shangwu, you won't try to back out. He was referring to the bet between the two of them over whose disciple would perform better. Shangwu gave a thumbs up, then slowly turned it downward. Then I'll give you a chance to lose. I was speechless. Master, where exactly is your confidence coming from? If I remembered correctly, Murong Xiao possessed the bright flood body and was hailed as the greatest genius Ziyang Prefecture had seen in 10 years. If not for Yingbing, Murong Xiao would unquestionably have been the #1 disciple of this intake.
Han He said calmly, "My disciple is untalented, only at the 5th vein of the Qi blood realm, yet he can already descend to the 2nd level of Shenfeng Cave. Truly shameful, truly shameful."
He's only just a little stronger than I was at the same age. Shangwu actually looked a little surprised. At only the 5th vein, and you're already letting him train inside Shenfeng Cave? Hanhe's lips curled into a mysterious smile. This old man has his own arrangements. No need for you to concern yourself. Shangwu curled her lips. She clearly wanted to say, so what if it's Shenfeng Cave? My disciple can do it too. But in the end, she didn't say it aloud. At that moment, I suddenly asked, Elder Han He, can outsiders enter Shenfeng Cave? Shangwu immediately started signaling to me with her eyes. Foolish disciple, we don't have to fight over every little bit of pride. Han He glanced at me and said, you can enter, yes, but I advise you to think carefully. Other than Murong Xiao, everyone in that cave is at least in the inner breath realm. Murong Xiao can endure it only because his natural body is exceptionally strong. The others can protect themselves with inner breath. I looked straight at him and said, I'll just try the outer area first. If I can't handle it, I definitely won't force it. Han He inwardly shook his head. No wonder this boy had already clashed with others as soon as he entered the martial practice hall. He had only just made some progress in martial arts, and already didn't know the height of heaven or the depth of earth. Maybe it was good for him to suffer a little. Fine, Han He said. You can go in, but your safety is your own responsibility. If something happens, don't blame me or your master. I cupped my hands in thanks, then looked at Chang Wu. She narrowed her eyes, thought for a moment, then pulled out a small bell from her robe. If you can't hold on, shake it hard twice. This is a twin heart bell. If one bell is shaken hard, the other one will ring too. As long as the two aren't separated by thousands of miles, it works. Shang Wu might act careless and wild, but she still didn't want her precious disciple to get hurt for real. After taking the bell, I walked into Shenfeng Cave. There were plenty of people on the first level, and some of them recognized me immediately. Whoa, that's true disciple Li. What's he doing here? Training, maybe? He doesn't look like he has any body-tempering foundation. And he's not at the inner breath realm yet, so he shouldn't need metal aura to polish his inner breath either. Everyone was puzzled, but I had no intention of explaining myself. I walked forward 50 steps, then stopped. I let out a long breath. At this point, my skin had already started to sting. I still had 10 years of martial insight left. Fine. I would first bring the extreme weapon body into the beginner stage. The moment the thought moved, all 10 years of martial comprehension poured into the technique, and the extreme weapon body jumped straight to great success. I sat down cross-legged, and the icy, murderous, razor-sharp intent swirling around me was drawn into my body. He's actually started cultivating? How long do you think he can last? I bet not even one incense stick. 100 breaths at most. Don't you people have your own cultivation to do? Why are you staring at him? I'm a blacksmith. Thank you very much. Seeing me sit there like an old monk in meditation, a lot of people started gossiping, and some even began betting on how long I could stay. But before the betting could really start, I suddenly stood up. What the hell? It hasn't even been 30 breaths, so he really can't handle it. Wait, he's not going back. That shout snapped everyone to attention. It was true. I wasn't turning around. I was continuing deeper in. In the blink of an eye, I was already heading toward the second level. What is he doing? Does he not want to live anymore? No, wait. He actually looks fine. What the hell? He really went down to the second level. Everyone was stunned. The moment I stepped onto the second level, my mind turned heavy, and my thoughts became disordered, as if a cold, invasive force had penetrated straight into my heart. I quickly took out the clear heart pill, poured one out, and pressed it beneath my tongue. Only then did that feeling fade away. I continued onward and took another 100 steps before suddenly seeing someone. His face was handsome and refined, but it was twisted in pain, and scale-like patterns had appeared across his skin. I immediately used my Fate Eye. Name, Murong Xiao. Fate, blue with black mixed in. Recent encounter. Affected by the icy, murderous intent, causing the demonic side of his bloodline to revive. If not removed in time, his temperament may change completely. The last time I saw Murong Xiao, his fate had been blue with a trace of purple. Now it had become blue with black. That alone showed just how close this half-demon true disciple was to a life-or-death turning point. One thought could lead to heaven, one thought to hell. Murong Xiao had been raised by his grandfather since childhood. He had not always been known as a genius. Since he was young, scale-like markings had appeared on his body, and for that reason he had often been bullied by the other children in the city. His grandfather used to say he was too kind and too weak, that even when he got beaten, he didn't know how to fight back. But only Murong Xiao himself knew the truth. What terrified him was never that he couldn't beat the others. What terrified him was the voice that would rise from deep inside his heart every time fists landed on him. Kill them all. Hurry and kill them all. That was why he never dared to fight back. He was afraid of blood. As he got older, that inner craving gradually faded, and he even kept to a vegetarian diet. Murong Xiao had started to believe he was no different from a normal person. That belief lasted until the day he reached the second level of Shenfeng Cave. You are a flood dragon. A born great demon, yet you refuse to eat flesh and blood. Stop erasing yourself. Return to your true nature. Then you will never again be bullied by the weak. His suppressed instincts had never disappeared. They were like a huge pile of dry grass. The moment a spark touched it, the fire became impossible to control. Just as Murong Xiao's consciousness was about to collapse, and the scales had almost covered his whole face, someone suddenly pried open his mouth and shoved something inside. Before he could even taste what it was, it slid down his throat. What happened next was astonishing. His mind rapidly cleared. Murong Xiao opened his eyes in a daze and saw a bright, handsome young man about his own age standing in front of him, smiling openly. The youth held a porcelain bottle that gave off a faint medicinal fragrance, and just smelling it made one feel mentally refreshed. Murong Xiao recognized him at once. He was the boy from the initiation ceremony who had also been accepted as a true disciple. You're finally all right, I said with relief. That was close. There were very few people on the second level to begin with, and I had been the closest to him. If Murong Xiao had truly lost his mind to the murderous intent, then I probably would have been his first target. Murong Xiao quietly thanked me. Even without being told, he understood that I had just saved him. Whatever I had fed him must have been some extremely valuable pill. "Thank you for helping me, Brother Li," he said. "I was careless and let the murderous intent cloud my mind." I smiled and looked at him like I could see straight through him. "I'm afraid it's not just that, is it?" Actually, I once read about this in an ancient text. It said that people with half-demon bodies are often affected by their bloodline. The higher the bloodline rank, the deeper the influence. If it isn't controlled, then their demonic nature can revive. Your bloodline should be something like a flood dragon. Just now, I even saw little horns growing on your head. Before I could finish, Murong Xiao's expression changed several times in quick succession. Then his face darkened, as if he had made some kind of decision, and he began walking slowly toward me, one step at a time. I instinctively took 2 cautious steps back. Don't tell me this guy's mind snapped and now he wants to silence me? The thought had only just surfaced when Murong Xiao dropped to his knees with a clean, solid thud. He knelt so hard that the blue stone beneath him cracked. "Please," he said, "don't tell anyone." I was honestly a little stunned. The Fate Eye's evaluation had said Murong Xiao's nature was kind. That really was true. For a second, I even had the evil urge to lean over and whisper, "You wouldn't want anyone else to find out about your half-demon body, would you?" At that point, I felt like no matter what request I made, he'd probably agree to it. Shaking away those dark thoughts, I asked instead, "Doesn't Elder Han, he also know about your half-demon body?" Murong Xiao gave a bitter smile. "You know, people in Xiang Prefecture all call me the Killing Child, right?" That was actually a lie my grandfather made up. After Murong Xiao explained things in detail, I finally understood. The Bright Flood was a calamity beast. Whenever one appeared, bloodshed and disaster followed. Back then, Murong Xiao's father had brought home a woman, Murong Xiao's mother. The two of them soon married. Only after Murong Xiao was conceived did the old head of the Murong family discover the shocking truth. His son was a ruthless man whose courage was beyond ordinary comprehension. A lot happened after that, but in the end, Murong Xiao was born safely. The old family head knew it would be impossible to hide a half-demon body forever, so instead of trying to suppress the matter entirely, he chose a different route. He spread rumors throughout the city. Over time, everyone in Xiang Prefecture came to believe that Murong Xiao carried a trace of water Qilin bloodline. Qilin were auspicious beasts, so as the story spread, Murong Xiao became known everywhere as the Qilin Child. After hearing the full story, I was completely shaken. His whole family was terrifyingly bold. "Don't worry," I told him. "I'll keep your secret, but even if I say nothing, sooner or later you'll still be exposed." Murong Xiao fell silent for a long time, then let out a long sigh. He knew that too. Even if he got through today, what about tomorrow? As a martial cultivator, he couldn't spend his whole life acting like a harmless schoolteacher. Then Murong Xiao's eyes suddenly lit up. "Right, what was that pill you fed me just now?" "This is a clear heart pill," I said, handing him the bottle. "Clear heart pill?" Murong Xiao poured one out and examined it carefully. His expression first brightened, then darkened again. "I've taken clear heart pills before. They didn't have this kind of effect." He stared at the pill and said quietly, "This really is a clear heart pill. But it has 6 patterns. Even the simplest healing pill, once refined to 6 patterns, was something people might never encounter in their whole lives. Its value far exceeded the medicinal effect itself. Even if an alchemist succeeded in refining one, they normally would never put it up for sale." "All right, I'm leaving," I said. "I still need to keep training. Just keep the pills for now. Men have gold beneath their knees, so I won't count this as wasting that grand meal of yours. As for your bloodline problem, I'll go look through that ancient text again. Maybe there's a solution." Murong Xiao stayed kneeling there in a daze, clutching the porcelain bottle. He had grown up with wealth and privilege, but this was the first time in his life he truly felt what it meant for poverty to limit the imagination. This was a full bottle of 6 pattern pills, not just one. He didn't even know how to calculate what something like that was worth. Murong Xiao had only taken a few steps before stopping dead in place, because he suddenly realized the place I was heading toward was somewhere even he could no longer advance. The 3rd level, his voice echoed through the cave. Even with his own body strength, he could only make it to the middle section of the 2nd level. Just imagining someone in the Qi blood realm entering the 3rd level of Shenfeng Cave was enough to make his scalp go numb. No, he just saved me. I can't let anything happen to him. Since he himself couldn't reach the 3rd level, there was only one thing left to do. Go get help. Murong Xiao scrambled to his feet and sprinted out of Shenfeng Cave at full speed, while I remained completely unaware of all this. As I walked, I also noticed a system prompt floating in front of me. "You have an unclaimed investment feedback reward. Claim now?" I chose no. My full attention was on the 3rd level. The moment I stepped inside, I looked up and saw all kinds of weapons embedded sparsely across the mountain walls. There might still be people on this level, but at least none of them were within my line of sight. This should be far enough. If I went any deeper, then even with the extreme weapon body, I'd be in danger. I found a blue stone and sat down. First, I took out a gourd and gulped down 2 mouthfuls of wine. Then I exhaled a long breath of alcohol, crushed a clear heart pill between my teeth, swallowed it, and began circulating my technique. As the extreme weapon body started operating, the icy, murderous, metallic intent in the area washed over my body again and again. Sweat quickly soaked through my clothes, and white steam rose from the top of my head. For the first time, I truly understood just how agonizing body tempering cultivation was. But now that I had started, there was no reason to quit halfway. And while I cultivated, the weapons embedded in the rock walls seemed to sense something. One after another, they began to tremble. At the same time, inside the Divine Weapon Peak courtyard, Han He casually asked Shangwu what body tempering art she had taught me. Even though he was convinced Murong Xiao could never lose, the old man still knew that only by understanding both sides could one remain undefeated. But Shangwu's next sentence nearly made him spray his tea all over the place. Body tempering art? I didn't teach him one. She rested her chin on one hand and yawned lazily. He only opened his meridians yesterday. Where would he even find the time to learn body tempering? Han He's face twitched. You let your disciple enter Shenfeng Cave without even knowing what body refining method he's practicing? He had thought Shangwu had prepared some hidden move in advance in order to win their bet. Could it be that the kid had just randomly grabbed some low-grade ironcloth shirt manual and started practicing like an idiot? Right then, Murong Xiao burst into the courtyard in a panic. Master, this is bad. His back was soaked with sweat, not from exhaustion, but from pure urgency. Han He frowned and asked why he had left cultivation. He had always thought his disciple had a steady temperament, which was why he had let him enter the second level of Shenfeng Cave in the first place. So why did he suddenly look so terrified? What major disaster could possibly happen in Shenfeng Cave while it was practically under his nose? Murong Xiao didn't waste time. Brother Li entered the third level of Shenfeng Cave. Master, hurry and save him. Han He froze. Brother Li? Which Brother Li? Murong Xiao answered at once. The true disciple under Elder Shangwu. Shangwu's face instantly changed. That brat went to the third level? Everyone in the forging yard inhaled sharply. These were people who worked with weapons all year long, and even many of them didn't dare stay long on the third level. If someone in the Chi Blood realm went down there, wouldn't they definitely die? Han He shot to his feet, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. To reach the third level, one had to first pass through the second. A new martial beginner in the early Chi Blood realm with no body tempering experience shouldn't even have been able to survive the second level, yet Murong Xiao clearly didn't look like he was making it up. After a moment of thought, Han He came up with one possibility. Maybe the kid had some treasure on him, something that could isolate the murderous edge inside the cave. Shangwu, meanwhile, was already losing all calm. She quickly pulled out the paired twin heart bell from her robe. It hadn't rung yet. Han He said heavily, On the third level, your disciple would probably lose his mind to the killing intent the instant he entered. If he has a treasure protecting him, then he might survive for a short while. Before he could finish speaking, a streak of red shot out like a meteor. Shangwu had already rushed off. Han He followed right after. If a true disciple died inside the cave, even he, as an elder, would have to answer for it. Zhongmu made no effort to hide her aura. The scorching heat she radiated even suppressed the metallic murderous aura inside Shenfeng Cave itself. As a result, quite a few martial cultivators on the first and second levels started trembling. It didn't take long before Shangwu reached the third level, but the instant she stepped in, she stopped. The tension on her face gradually faded and then turned into confusion. Han He came down behind her with his hands behind his back, just about to speak with smug satisfaction. He had been planning to say that this time his disciple had truly saved hers, and that Shangwu would owe Divine Weapon Peak a favor. But the words got stuck in his throat. This elder, who had presided over Divine Weapon Peak for 20 years, froze in place the moment he saw the scene before him. A second ago, he had been thinking that at last this woman Shangwu would owe him something and wouldn't be able to keep coming to Divine Weapon Peak to freeload. He had never imagined that what he would see next would be unforgettable for the rest of his life. There I was, sitting quietly on a blue stone, while dozens of weapons floated around me in circles. Every one of them radiated a tame, obedient intent. And without exception, every single one was a spirit weapon. Every disciple who entered the intersect had the right to come to Shenfeng Cave and choose one weapon. If they were lucky, they could obtain the acknowledgement of a spirit weapon. Of course, most disciples ultimately had no choice but to select from the first or second level. For an ordinary disciple, even obtaining the approval of a single spirit weapon was already heaven-sent fortune. Even most of the peak elders used no more than spirit weapons themselves. Yet here I was, being acknowledged by several dozen of them at once. Han He would sooner believe that his own eyes as an inner landscape expert had gone bad. Shangwu immediately regained her relaxed look and snorted with satisfaction. See, I told you this kid wasn't brainless. Isn't he cultivating just fine? Han He was speechless. A second earlier, she had been so anxious she'd nearly run into the walls on the way down. Now she was acting as if she'd never worried at all. But he had no time to argue. The important thing was that the boy truly was cultivating. In this whole region, the murderous metallic force of the cave was almost centered around him. Even someone at the spirit observation realm would have to think carefully before staying in such a place, yet he remained completely unharmed. Han Hu himself was an expert in weapons and far more sensitive than most to this kind of aura. And precisely because he understood it so well, he knew how outrageous this was for someone in the Chi blood realm. Then Shangwu suddenly wiped the corner of her mouth and asked, eyes sparkling, "Hey, Han He, doesn't Shenfeng Cave have a rule that if a spirit weapon acknowledges you, then you can take it away?" She clearly had no spirit weapon herself. Well, not because she lacked one, but because she had something even better. Still, this was several dozen spirit weapons. If her precious disciple could just pick as many as he liked from the third level, then this trip would be an absolute goldmine, and there might even be more deeper inside. Han He instantly felt a headache coming on. "What do you think this is, a marketplace?" "You remembered wrong. Each disciple can only take one weapon out of Shenfeng Cave." Right then, as the effects of the clear heart pill began to fade, I stopped circulating my technique and opened my eyes. Looking into the dim, cold depths ahead of me, I suddenly remembered that when I had run the extreme weapon body to its limit just now, I had felt something calling to me. The feeling was weak, but it was real. Something deeper in Shenfeng Cave was summoning me. "You may choose one spirit weapon from these and take it away," Han He's voice came from behind. I finally turned around and noticed the two elders standing there. Han He looked as if he was trying not to be too shocked. I cupped my hands and thanked him, but said I had no plans to choose a weapon for the time being. My father's greatest hobby was collecting all kinds of weapons, and he often said that even in his dreams, he wanted to own one genuine spirit weapon. So I naturally understood their value, but the problem was that I hadn't yet learned any weapon techniques. I couldn't very well pick a random spirit weapon first and then force myself to learn a matching style afterward. Shangwu immediately nodded. "Exactly, disciple. No rush." Then she turned around with a grin and said to Han, "He, when he can reach the fourth level later, we can choose at leisure then." "Right, Elder Han He?" Han He's eyelids twitched violently. The fourth level contained the true treasures at the bottom of Divine Weapon Peak's chest. "Let's talk after he can actually get there," he said stiffly. "Sooner or later," Shangwu replied proudly. Seeing that old man, Han, he forced to eat his own words, made her so happy she slapped my shoulder, only to pause in surprise. "Why are you harder?" I looked at her and said dryly, "What exactly do you think I came to Shenfeng Cave for?" The extreme weapon body truly lived up to expectations. At the very least, a slap from Master no longer hurt. My rough estimate was that my physical strength had already increased by at least 30%, and this was only the first day of cultivation. It would only get stronger from here. Once my body became even tougher, I could go deeper, and the thing resonating with me definitely wasn't on the fourth level. It was deeper still. At the cave entrance, the place was in uproar. True Disciple Li entered the third level? How the hell did he get in there? He's done for. A few years ago, some guy at the early inner breath stage accidentally entered the third level. By the time they dragged him out, his body was full of wounds and his mind was ruined. Even after he got treated, he was just a drooling idiot. He wouldn't really die on our peak, right? That's Shangwu's disciple. Many disciples had even stopped forging just to gather around and gossip. If a true disciple had really died in Shenfeng Cave, that would be huge news inside Qingyuan sect. Murong Xiao paced back and forth like an ant on a hot pan, muttering constantly that someone as good as Brother Li absolutely couldn't be allowed to come to harm. Then Han He emerged and immediately shouted at the crowd to get back to their own business. Shangwu and I followed behind him. The moment he saw me, Murong Xiao rushed over in 2 long steps and waved his hand in front of my face. "Brother Li, are you all right? Do you still recognize me?" I was baffled. "You've got 5 fingers. Why wouldn't I recognize that?" Murong Xiao instantly relaxed and looked relieved. That night, the huge mountain range of Qingyuan sect lay in silence. In the outer disciples' shared living quarters, one room was still lit. Xiaoqin sat there with the piece of black gold in his hand, while his realm had already recovered to the 9th vein of the Qi blood realm. More than half of the black gold had already turned gray-white. Once he opened his eyes, joy appeared on his resolute face. He had returned to the 9th vein, but when he looked down at the black gold in his palm, he couldn't help looking puzzled. The whole piece got absorbed? I shouldn't have been able to do that. Then an aged voice suddenly sounded in his ear. "Naturally you couldn't. It was because of me." Xiaoqin's whole body went rigid. "Who are you?" The old voice replied that speaking of his name would take a very long time. 10 minutes later, Xiaoqin sat there in a mixture of surprise and confusion. It turned out that the reason his cultivation had fallen was because of the jade pendant on his chest, or rather, because of the existence inside it, an old man who called himself Chenxing Wuzun. If what the old man said was true, then in his peak years he had been far stronger even than Qingyuan sect's sectmaster. He had also told Xiaoqin that he could become his teacher, and that in exchange, Xiaoqin would one day need to help rebuild his body after growing strong enough. It seemed the 7-star ancient jade really had chosen the right person. The old voice praised him, saying that only because Xiaoqin had persisted so long without giving up martial cultivation had he finally been awakened. Since that was so, it was only right to give him some benefits too, so the boy wouldn't remain overly guarded. As those words fell, the 7-star ancient jade suddenly lit up. It was as though a small opening had appeared inside it, and from within floated out a small brocade pouch. Inside it was an object soaked in blood essence, a relic from a powerful bloodline beast. Wearing it on the body could ward off evil influences and nourish the flesh with all kinds of marvelous effects. Xiaoqian held the brocade pouch and felt warmth immediately spread through his whole body. But he still said honestly, if it were only me, I don't know how long it would have taken before teacher awakened. The main reason was that junior brother Li gave me that black gold. The old voice clearly paused. Black gold? In a barren place like the Eastern Wasteland, black gold should have been extremely rare and precious. Yet someone had willingly given it to him? Xiaoqian nodded seriously. Yes. Junior brother Li is a noble and upright person. Teacher, I want to repay him. I'd like to give him this brocade pouch. Now that he had this old senior with him, he felt he probably wouldn't encounter too much danger, even without the pouch. But after all, this was something his teacher had given him. He couldn't just pass it on without his teacher's consent. Cheng Wuzun didn't stop him. He only said that such a thought was good, and that in the future, once Xiaoqian had made something of himself, he could help Li Jiwu even more. Back at Chushui Pavilion, the little courtyard was filled with the fragrance of nature and rendered fat. Roasted meat, 5 taels a skewer. Pretty girls eat free. Oh, here's a beauty, 1 skewer for you. I had dug out a charcoal brazier usually used in winter and turned it into a grill. I skewered lean beast meat from Spirit Beast Peak and roasted it until the oil sizzled, all while calling out in a deliberately funny street vendor tone. Good disciple, Shangwu said in amazement after 1 bite, eyes full of enjoyment. Did you work as a cook in your previous life? She had eaten plenty of roast meat before, but somehow the stuff her disciple made was just absurdly delicious. Smiling, I picked up a few more skewers. And here's one more beauty. This blackhorn goat meat nourishes qi and blood, so this one's for you. Yingbing bit lightly into it and chewed in silence before giving a very serious 4-word evaluation. It's very tasty. For the ice block to give such a high rating in a full 4 words meant it really was excellent. Even Yingbing, who usually preferred light food, actually ate openly for a while. While we were eating, Shangwu started trying to swindle food from her. Little Binger, you understand the virtue of respecting teachers the best, so this skewer of grilled fish should go to me, Yingbing answered flatly. But you are not my master. Shangwu wasn't discouraged and continued coaxing her, saying that little girls shouldn't eat too much or they'd get fat. Yingbing calmly replied that she was still growing. Shangwu got so frustrated she nearly exploded. She tried flattering, persuading, and tricking her, yet she still failed to scam even 1 skewer of grilled fish from Yingbing. As Yingbing quietly ate, a strand of hair by her ear stirred in the breeze, half hiding the faintest hint of a smile. She had thought of the past. In her hazy memories of the Eastern Wasteland, only a few important people had left a deep impression on her, and Shangwu was one of them. When Qingyuan's sect was later destroyed, if not for Shangwu, she likely wouldn't have escaped Xiang Prefecture alive. Sadly, that was all in the past. Shaking her head, Yingbing drove away the thought. In this life, those tragedies would never happen again. Good meat naturally needed good wine. I finally sat down to eat too, holding a bottle of wine in a pale jade-colored flask. The moment I opened it, a fragrance spread out that was both spicy and refreshing. When the wine was poured, it separated in the cup into distinct red and blue colors. What kind of wine is this? It smells incredible. Shangwu sniffed it and instantly came alive, her eyes widening. Ice fire wine. Smiling, I placed a bowl in front of Shangwu, then poured another cup for Yingbing. Yingbing's moon-shaped brows lifted slightly as she picked it up and studied it. The red and blue reflection in her clear, icy eyes looked especially beautiful. Shangwu's voice suddenly turned unusually soft and almost delicate after 1 sip. Where on earth did you get this wine? Her pretty eyes blinked lightly, as gentle as ripples on water. I immediately leaned back a little. It was hard to connect the soft, alluring woman in front of me with the same person who could punch off a mountaintop. I found it in some secret place by chance, I said smoothly. Only got a few jars. Shangwu had no reason to doubt me. So you really did run into that kind of opportunity. No wonder you could enter the 3rd level of Shenfeng Cave without a scratch. Yingbing took a sip too and more or less understood. In her mind, I had probably inherited some hidden legacy and used treasures left behind in that inheritance to improve my physique. The Icefire wine was likely one of those treasures, meant to temper the successor's body. Perhaps it was something I had encountered during those few days she spent opening her meridians in Xiang City. Not bad. At the very least, it meant that in the future, I might be able to inherit some of Shangwu's path and become one of Qingyuan sect's elders. That was already a massive change in fate. Shangwu smacked her lips and downed the cup in one go. Then she asked how many jars I still had left. I offered to give her one if she liked it, but Shangwu refused, saying that the wine was meant for body tempering and wasn't useful to her. I was a little surprised. Then I said that the next time I went down the mountain, I'd bring her a few jars of good wine instead. While speaking, I casually lifted a cup and took a sip, only to realize a second later that something was off. I hadn't poured myself a cup at all, which meant what I had just drunk was Yingbing's. Shangwu tilted her head. Little Binger, what's wrong? Yingbing shook her head lightly. Nothing. Then drink a little more. This wine is very helpful for you Qi Blood Realm cultivators. As Shangwu spoke, she also pulled out her own gourd and took several gulps. I coughed awkwardly, gave Yingbing a fresh cup, and filled it again. Yingbing drank in silence. Just now, a faint ripple had appeared on the still lake of her heart, and that was what confused her. In her previous life, there had been countless men who pursued her, those of astonishing talent, those with terrifying backgrounds, those with power capable of shaking ages. Even one of the nine heavens himself had once expressed admiration for her. Yet not only had she never reciprocated, she had never even allowed herself the thought. Over time, the world came to say that the female emperor of Guai Palace had no emotions and no desires. In truth, she had simply been unwavering in her pursuit of the martial path. Love and mortal attachments were nothing but stones underfoot, obstacles that wore down heroes. Yet just now a strange flicker had risen in her heart, and she had not felt repulsed by it. Maybe it was because of the ice-fire wine. Yingbing silently guided the faint trace of alcoholic warmth through her body, not truly caring about the taste. After a while, Shangwu yawned and said that for the next period of time I should cultivate well, because soon the sect would hold a trial for the new disciples, and I mustn't embarrass her. A trial? I asked blankly. Shangwu wiped the wine stain from her lips and explained that it basically meant sending the new disciples into the Qingyuan mountain range to gather herbs, hunt some exotic beasts, and do similar things. For people in the Qi-blood realm, it counted as a decent challenge, and some of the monster beasts there were indeed hard to deal with. She added that Yingbing and I should look after each other when the time came. I nodded, roughly understanding. It was a classic novel setup. Still, I couldn't help saying, Master Yingbing is the sect master's disciple. Her treatment is way better than mine. Why would she need to look after me? Speaking of which, didn't you only start calling her Little Binger because you were interested in her from the very beginning? What was even stranger was that Yingbing didn't seem to resist it at all. The two of them acted as if they'd known each other for years. Shangwu snorted and pulled out a booklet. Who says I don't care about you? Here, practice this. It was a martial arts manual. For my current stage, it was exactly appropriate. It was definitely much better than the Six Harmonies Fist. The title written on it was Blazing Prairie Sword Art. Even though it was only a middle-tier martial art, outside Qingyuan sect, it was already strong enough to serve as the hidden trump card of many sects. Plenty of smaller sects still regarded lower-tier martial arts or even unranked arts as priceless treasures. I thanked her sincerely. Shangwu waved her hand, grabbed her little gourd, and swaggered out of Chushui Pavilion. At the table, Yingbing put down her cup and her emotions returned to calm. In the upcoming sect trial, there was something she needed to obtain, and no one else could help her with it. She was going to claim an inheritance, although she suspected I had obtained some hidden legacy. Compared to the inheritance she was about to receive, mine was nothing but clouds and mud. After all, no truly great powerhouse would leave an inheritance in a barren place like the Eastern Wasteland. The one Yingbing intended to open was different. It had not been left behind by a human. Inside my room, I was already checking the day's investment returns. Successful investment: 1 serving of ice-fire wine and 1 serving of roasted lean beast meat. Feedback reward: 20 years of martial comprehension and 1 piece of black gold. I couldn't help sighing. Just treating them to a little wine had earned me 20 years of martial insight. This was the kind of thing no one ever had too much of. For the sake of rewards, I absolutely had to hug the ice block's thigh tightly. Was that really a thigh? No, it was a shining money tree. The system then reminded me that I still had 1 more feedback reward waiting to be claimed. That made me remember Murong Xiao. Saving him during the day should definitely count as a major alteration to his fate. What good stuff would that bring? I looked forward to it a little. Successful investment: 1 bottle of clear heart pills. You successfully saved Murong Xiao and prevented demonic deviation. Feedback reward: Perfection Scripture Seal. The Perfection Scripture Seal could be stamped onto any martial art, allowing it to be deduced and perfected, raising its rank up to upper tier level. I froze. Perfecting martial arts? The next instant, I took out the Blazing Prairie Sword Art Master had just given me. Since I didn't have any other martial arts to upgrade at the moment, I pressed the seal lightly onto its pages. The sword art recorded in the manual instantly changed. It became Fire Crane Thousand Feathers Sword. Then I injected 20 years of martial comprehension into it and barely managed to push it to small success. Next door, Yingbing lowered her eyes and silently calculated. The inheritance land she wanted to enter required at least the 8th vein of the Qi-blood realm. That meant within the next 10+ days, she still had to open at least 6 more meridians. Then a memory seemed to resurface. The sect trial of this generation had apparently not been peaceful. In her previous life, she had not successfully opened her meridians in time, and so hadn't been a participant. But she had heard some rumors. A small number of disciples had gone missing during the trial. Not died, gone missing. No bodies, no survivors, nothing. No one knew what had truly happened. Yingbing's eyes flickered slightly. In her previous life, the secret realm she entered by chance had been one born from one of the 9 souls of the 9-colored. Primordial Emperor, the heroic soul. It was because of that inheritance that she first revealed her talent and changed her fate. In the rest of her life, that inheritance remained inseparable from her. Later, through one method or another, she gathered all 9 souls of the 9-colored Primordial Emperor and they became one of the greatest pillars of her invincible path. Among all the major opportunities in her life, the nine-colored primordial emperor ranked firmly in the top three. Even the divine art she created herself, the nine-colored mysterious yellow scripture, required the complete set of 9 souls in order to be cultivated. Then she noticed movement from the room next door. Was he still training? He did have some perseverance. Strangely, every time she thought of me living in the room beside her, the once frozen lake of her heart would stir with the faintest ripple. She didn't hate the feeling, but she hated that the feeling could affect her. Even more unpleasant was that she didn't understand where it came from. Was it because she still owed me a favor? After thinking for a while, Ying Bing made a decision. When she went to the inheritance land, she would bring me along. Even the smallest scrap of opportunity from that place would be enough to change the destiny of an ordinary person. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. My third meridian was already just a hair away from being fully opened. At the very least, my physical strength was clearly much greater than before. I had reached that conclusion after accidentally snapping a pair of chopsticks while making breakfast. The ice block was still cultivating. What a machine. No wonder she was a heaven-favored girl. I placed breakfast in the steamer. All she had to do later was light the fire and warm it up before eating. Was that really breakfast I was giving her? No, it was bright, shining investment capital. And given her fate level, there was a good chance she might trigger another surprise reward for me. Details decided success or failure. I was basically a genius investor. There were already 5,000 taels of gold sitting inside my system space, not to mention all kinds of precious and unusual items that might come in handy later. A truly successful investor understood one truth. Even a mosquito's leg was still meat. In the morning, I planned to head back to Shenfeng Cave and keep training the extreme weapon body. In my view, a strong body was just as important as realm. Sure, I wanted to become a swordsman, but who said a sword saint couldn't build tanky too? Besides, the extreme weapon body improved one's resonance with weapons. Once I got a good sword in the future, it would let my sword arts erupt with even greater power. I had only just stepped outside when I ran into Xiaoqin. The moment he saw me, he smiled and said that thanks to me, he had returned to the 10th. No, back to the 9th vein of the Qi blood realm. I smiled back and said that was something to congratulate him on. I wasn't surprised at all, and I was genuinely happy too. Old Xiao was a decent person. If he could avoid wasting away and return early to the path of rising, that was a good thing. Xiaoqin said seriously that without that piece of black gold from me, he might have wasted much longer. For him, it was equivalent to receiving a new life. I told him that recovering was good, and at this pace, he'd soon be able to return to the inner sect. Inwardly, I guessed that he had probably already activated the 7-star ancient jade. I just didn't know whether it contained a legacy, the inheritance of a great expert, or an actual surviving old monster. But no matter which one it was, Xiaoqin's future achievements would definitely not be low. While I was thinking that, I suddenly felt someone was observing me. My thoughts turned at once. Could it be Xiaoqin's old grandpa in the jade? Xiaoqin then spoke with complete sincerity. He said that he truly didn't know how to repay the favor of being helped in the snow, but recently by chance, a senior had given him a protective talisman, and he wanted me to have it. He took out a brocade pouch from his sleeve. Inside was a bloodline treasure from a powerful beast. It could ward off evil and nourish the body. I more or less knew exactly who this senior was. So there really was an old grandpa in the jade. No wonder he could casually produce such a good protective treasure.
Smiling, I accepted the brocade pouch and thanked Xiaoqin. 1 investment, 2 rounds of returns.
I was truly winning big. Xiaoqin then said he still had some things to deal with and left. I immediately wore the brocade pouch and could feel a trace of warmth spreading through me. At that moment, there was movement behind me. Yingbing had opened her door and come out. As Xiaoqin walked down the mountain path, his steps felt much lighter than before. But before he got very far, Qianxing Wuzun's voice sounded in his mind with thick amazement and even a trace of shock. Such aptitude, it crowns all ages. This was the same old expert who had casually claimed that even the lord of Xiang Prefecture was like an ant, yet now his tone had clearly become unsteady. Xiaoqin paused and subconsciously asked whether teacher meant that junior brother Li had astonishing talent. Not him, the old man said. That little girl. Xiaoqin thought for a moment, then nodded. Ah, teacher meant junior sister Yingbing. He had heard that she and junior brother Li were childhood sweethearts, had grown up together, and were now both true disciples. In the future, the two of them would probably improve side by side, and perhaps even become a celebrated pair. Jiangxing Wuzun gave a long sigh. Progress side by side? You have no idea what she carries. People like that are born in response to an era. Your junior brother Li, even with his natural body and talent, can only be called outstanding in a small place like Xiang Prefecture. But only in Xiang Prefecture. That little girl, however, may one day shine brilliantly across the entire 9 heavens and 10 earths. I never imagined that after all these years I would be fortunate enough to witness such an existence in her earliest, weakest days. Xiaoqin was utterly confused. Yesterday, his teacher had looked like the type of supreme expert who could crush the world beneath his feet, and now his attitude had changed so abruptly it was almost absurd.
Time passed. 10 days later, I stepped into Shenfeng Cave again.
Oh, true disciple Li is here. Junior brother Morong even asked about you this morning. You really train your body every single day.
Senior brother Li, you must have a special physique just like Murong Xiao, right?
In these 10 days, I had become familiar with many of the Divine Weapon Peak disciples. I, true disciple Li, had no airs at all and treated everyone with the same easy warmth. Last time, one disciple had gotten injured, and if I hadn't taken out medicine in time, that inner sect disciple might have lost the use of his hand. In just 10 short days, outsiders might have mistaken me for the true disciple of Divine Weapon Peak rather than Kunyu Peak. After greeting everyone, I stepped into the third level. I swallowed a clear heart pill, sat down cross-legged, and began cultivating. At the same time, a young man arrived at the entrance to Shenfeng Cave. True disciple Ying?
Hasn't he not come here in a long time?
He must have only just emerged from secluded cultivation. Do you think he's already entered the spirit observation realm? Hard to say. If true disciple Ying has come to temper his body, then he'll definitely be going to the third level. Then won't he run straight into true disciple Li? The disciples on the first level couldn't help whispering among themselves. But after only a few words, all the gossip died abruptly, because not far away, Ying Huacheng had turned around and swept his gaze across the Divine Weapon Peak disciples present. For some reason, anyone he looked at felt like prey being stared down by a wild beast.
Narrowing his eyes, Ying Huacheng asked, "Since when did this sect gain a true disciple, Li?"
Someone answered that he was from the latest initiation ceremony and had just joined Qing Yuan sect. In the very next instant, Ying Huacheng vanished from where he stood and reappeared before the speaking disciple. A disciple who just entered the sect can go into Shenfeng Cave's third level? Are you making fun of me? The inner disciple swallowed nervously and explained that everyone knew true disciple Li came every day, and that on the first day, even Elder Han, he had been frightened enough to go down and fetch him, only to find that he was completely fine. The others around them hurriedly nodded in agreement.
Ying Huacheng was half convinced, half suspicious, and a trace of anger flashed through his eyes. After standing silently for several seconds, he gave a cold snort and turned away.
Only then did the suffocating pressure in everyone's chest finally disappear. Once he had completely vanished, someone quietly muttered that Ying Huacheng must have gone crazy from spending so long dealing with the beasts on Spirit Beast Peak. Another person instantly hissed at him not to speak nonsense. If Ying Huacheng had really entered the spirit observation realm, he might be able to hear.
Still, they all agreed on one thing. True disciple Li was much better.
He even treated them to drinks. As Ying Huacheng walked the second level of Shenfeng Cave, his mood was terrible. In order to gain this physique, he had paid a price ordinary people couldn't even imagine. Only after all that had he finally become capable of entering the third level to temper his body. Yet now someone had suddenly appeared, and people were saying that a freshly admitted disciple could enter with ease. Why? Didn't that make all the sacrifices he had made into a complete joke? Murong Xiao was one thing, since he at least had half demon blood. But where had this other true disciple come from? Did he also carry some kind of demonic bloodline?
The moment Ying Huacheng entered the third level, the flesh on his body began to writhe in irregular waves.
His thin frame swelled rapidly, as if something inside him were inflating him. He muttered that his 100 beast blood refinement was only a few lines away from completion. Once finished, it would be true consummation. Laughing under his breath, he strode forward. 10 minutes later, he abruptly stopped. Not far ahead sat a young man in meditation, surrounded by dozens, no, perhaps nearly 100 different weapons, most of them spirit weapons. This was probably half the spirit weapons on the entire third level. In that instant, Ying Huacheng's eyes went bloodshot. Feeling the tremors in the ground, I opened my eyes and looked back. Good grief, I hadn't realized it until I turned around. But what the hell was that thing? That shouldn't be human, right? Nobody ever told me there were monsters in Shenfeng Cave. Still, my body was now roughly comparable to a sharp weapon. I could probably try the fourth level. I only hesitated for exactly 3 1/3 seconds before standing up. Before that monster could react, I lifted my foot and stepped into the fourth level. As I left, the spirit weapons floating around me all quietly returned to their original places. Something seemed to shatter inside Ying Huacheng. It was his fragile Dao heart. He had schemed and struggled desperately to gain the acknowledgement of a single spirit weapon, while I couldn't even be bothered to glance at them. He had carried out hundreds, maybe thousands, of experiments to temper his body, even at the cost of turning himself into a monster. And yet, even now, he didn't dare approach the fourth level. For him, what I had as a starting point was already the finish line he could never reach. Ying Huacheng, born with a silver spoon in his mouth as the son of a peak lord, felt his mentality start to collapse on the spot. The flesh on his body writhed again, showing signs of losing control. Was that really a monster just now? After thinking about it again, I felt something was off. There were inner disciples guarding the entrance.
A monster shouldn't have been able to get in. Maybe it was just some senior brother who happened to be a little ugly. I stopped bothering with it.
On the fourth level, the sharp murderous aura hit me head on. Even though my body tempering had already achieved initial results, I still felt crushing pressure in an instant. My body, now comparable to a peak mortal weapon, immediately felt a faint stinging pain. The fourth level was more than 10 times harsher than the third. I took a light breath, and even my internal organs tingled faintly. Fortunately, I had tempered my organs and meridians together with my flesh. Otherwise, there was no way I could have endured this place. I raised my eyes to see what kind of weapons the fourth level nurtured. The enormous chamber was split in two. One half was covered in frost. The other half radiated heat strong enough to distort the air. And this was still inside a cave. The sight was far too unbelievable. There were far fewer weapons left here. In total, there were only 9 stone platforms, each with a weapon inserted into it. The first platform held a sword, completely crimson gold in color. As I approached, I saw words engraved on the stone before it. It said that the first master of Divine Weapon Peak had forged it by imitating the 5th-ranked Burning Sky Sword on the 9 provinces' Divine Weapon ranking, using scarlet gold and mysterious ice, and had named the weapon Qixiao. Weapons were divided into mortal, sharp spirit, treasure, and mysterious levels. Mysterious weapons lay above treasure weapons. If this sword was only an imitation and was already at the mysterious level, then the original Burning Sky Sword had to be even more terrifying. I clicked my tongue inwardly. From what I knew, even Divine Weapon Peak now needed a very long time to produce a single treasure weapon, let alone a mysterious one. After reading the introductions on all the stone platforms, I finally turned my gaze toward a rock wall not far away. Ever since my first day entering Shenfeng Cave, I had felt as if something was calling to me. But there was clearly no path ahead anymore. Did that mean I was supposed to break the wall? Without thinking too much, I sat down and continued refining my body. At the entrance to Shenfeng Cave, Yinghua Cheng, who had carried himself with towering superiority just moments ago, emerged in a far more miserable state. What he couldn't understand was that every spirit weapon had treated him with absolute rejection, yet had swarmed around some newcomer like worshipful courtiers. It felt like spending years chasing some perfect goddess, only to watch her turn around and throw herself into the arms of a stranger she had known for a few days. Ying Huacheng clenched his fists and headed for the back mountain of Divine Weapon Peak. From far away, he could already see Futu waiting there. "Where's the new vessel I asked for?" Ying Huacheng asked. Futu gave a mocking smile and replied that the boy was called Wang Hu, broad-shouldered and strong-waisted, and that the beast seed had already been fed to him. He even thanked me for it. Ying Huacheng's gaze flickered as he nodded. There should be a batch of outer disciples returning home after leaving the sect soon. Futu looked at him carefully. "You're not even going to let them go?" Ying Huacheng gave a cold snort. "After receiving Qingyuan sect's benefits, how can it be so easy to just return home in glory? If those worthless trash can still squeeze out some remaining use for me, then it's their honor from 3 lifetimes." Futu sneered inwardly. No wonder the 100-beast blood refinement was a forbidden art. Practice it too much and your brain would rot. But outwardly, he only acted hesitant. Ying Huacheng warned him not to forget who had guaranteed his entrance into Qingyuan's sect. Futu hadn't intended to refuse anyway. After pretending to be somewhat unwilling, he finally nodded and said he would think of something. But before he could leave, Ying Huacheng asked one more thing. What was the background of that new true disciple from the latest batch? Futu narrowed his eyes with a half-smile. "That one is the precious seedling of Kunyu Peak. You'd better not think about him. If you really provoke Shang Wu, not even Peak Lord Ying will be able to save you," Ying Huacheng muttered to himself. Shenfeng Cave, 4th level. Only the Peak Elders or a spirit observation expert with perfected body tempering should be able to enter and directly face mysterious weapons. That kid had to be carrying some treasure. His heart instantly filled with heat. Meanwhile, I still had no idea that someone had already set their eyes on me. Deep in the 4th level of Shenfeng Cave, my body was in the middle of a breakthrough. Right now, I was like a blade undergoing final sharpening, the cave's aura grinding away all impurities and revealing a terrifying edge. Most Qingyuan sect disciples used ordinary weapons. Only a minority of inner disciples could possess a true sharp weapon, whether obtained from Shenfeng Cave or bought elsewhere. But now my body itself was advancing toward the level of a sharp weapon. Suddenly, the aura radiating from me became even colder and fiercer. A layer of treasure-like light around my body grew stronger and stronger until it finally reached a limit. I snapped my eyes open. A gleam of terrible sharpness flashed within them. Then I opened my mouth and gently exhaled. In the next instant, a small crater exploded open in the mountain wall across from me. That breath of turbid air had shot out like a blade. If it struck someone at the early Chi blood stage, it would probably maim them heavily, even if it didn't kill them outright. I stood up and felt strength flooding every part of my body. Not to mention 9th grade. Even 8th grade might not be able to break my defense easily now. Then I walked to the far end of the 4th level and tapped the wall there lightly with my right index finger. The sound was crisp, not dull. Hollow. My brows lifted. I could tell that this section of wall was slightly different in color from the natural cave walls around it. It looked as though it had been built later by human hands. After thinking for a moment, I gathered the full strength of my 8 open meridians and my flesh, now comparable to a sharp weapon, and threw a punch like a dragon. Sure enough, there really was a path. But before I could celebrate, the moment the wall collapsed inward, the passage behind it erupted with a storm of energy. It felt as if countless swords were blasting toward me at once. The surging, icy metallic edge had become almost tangible. Shocked, I immediately circulated the extreme weapon body with all my strength. Only then did I manage to see clearly. Before me was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for one person to pass through. On the other side shone an intense red and blue radiance. There were two pools there. One looked like molten lava, the other was a freezing abyss of icy water. And where the two pools met, an ink-black hammer stood upside down in silence, dividing the mingled ice and fire waters into two streams. It was just one hammer, yet the moment it trembled, it was as if heaven and earth had split apart. The entire divine weapon peak shook. I had only looked at it once when my mind felt like it exploded. Part 7. When I looked at that hammer, a flood of scenes crashed into my mind. I saw a furnace explode so violently that almost nothing was left behind, and then I saw that same hammer later in the hands of other terrifying experts, smashing powerful enemies to death one after another. In one scene, a single strike reduced an entire mountain to dust. When I finally snapped back to my senses, I realized that what I had just felt was not an illusion. The whole of Divine Weapon Peak was genuinely trembling. I turned and ran at once, and as I ran, a strange voice echoed in my heart for no reason at all. "Come, I'm waiting for you." At Divine Weapon Peak, Han He had just taken a newly quenched weapon out of the forge. It was a three-pointed blade with a beast-mouth design, cold light gleaming from its edge. Murong Xiao looked at it with open admiration. Han Hu sighed that Divine Weapon Peak's former peak masters had once produced many truly great weapons, men capable of forging mysterious great arms. Then he looked at Murong Xiao with obvious hope, and said that with his half-demon body, perhaps one day he might even be able to wield the Pangaea meteor hammer. But before he could say more, the mountain shook violently. Han He's expression changed instantly. He seemed to realize something and shot straight toward Shenfeng Cave. In the next moment, his figure appeared at the cave entrance. Everyone still inside came rushing out as if their lives depended on it, each one wishing their parents had given them 2 extra legs. I came out with them, clothes torn and looking miserable. Murong Xiao hurried over and checked me in alarm. I forced myself to stay calm and said I had only accidentally ruined my clothes while training. But inside, my heart was in complete chaos. I was already certain the disturbance today had been caused by me. Then Murong Xiao suddenly said the elders had all arrived. Following his gaze, I saw 9 figures already standing at the entrance of Shenfeng Cave. Even Master was there. Only then did I fully realize how serious this had become. The abnormal movement in the cave had definitely been caused by that hammer. But what kind of weapon was it exactly? Murong Xiao suggested I go change clothes first, so I left with him. After we were gone, the elders began speaking in front of Shenfeng Cave. Qian Bufan carefully asked Han He whether it was really that thing, and Han He nodded grimly. Yes, it was the Pangaea meteor hammer. A middle-aged man whose aura resembled Yinghua Cheng's asked what exactly had happened. He was Ying Huaxuan, the peak elder of True Beast Peak. Shang Wu just laughed and said old men sure loved losing their tempers. The other 8 all glared at her at once, and Han He coldly warned her not to speak carelessly about Divine Weapon Peak's ancestral heavy treasure. Divine Weapon Peak was called that because it truly possessed a divine weapon. The Pangaea meteor hammer had already existed inside Shenfeng Cave before Qingyuan sect itself was founded. In later generations, only the peak masters of Divine Weapon Peak, after reaching the level of master smiths, and while forging mysterious weapons, were ever allowed to invite out that hammer and use it temporarily. Even then, they were only borrowing it, not truly wielding it as its owner. Only the sect master and the peak elders of each branch knew this secret. In the end, they stopped speculating and all went down together to inspect the cave. When they reached the 4th level and saw the great hole in the wall, all of them froze. It looked as if it had been blasted open by raw physical force alone. There were no traces of inner breath or martial intent. No one among the elders present could understand who had done it. But before they could think too deeply about that, Han He's expression shifted again. The others followed his gaze toward the deepest area, where ice and fire converged below. Then Shang Wu gave a crooked little smile and said that old antique hammer of Han He's seemed to have acknowledged a master. The words left all the elders breathing in sharply. Han He's face trembled, and for a moment he stood there like he had lost his soul. Chen Bufan fought to steady his emotions and asked the most important question of all. Who had it acknowledged? No one answered. That was what made it so strange. A divine weapon had acknowledged a master, yet it had still been left there untouched. Ying Huaxuan's eyes flashed as he said it couldn't possibly be because the person was unable to lift it. Han He immediately rejected that idea. A divine weapon would never acknowledge someone who couldn't even move it. In the end, after a long silence, Han He said he would investigate the matter himself and report it to the sect master once he had any clue. After a few more words, the peak elders all left the cave one after another, leaving only Han He behind to deal with the aftermath. After a long time, he finally sighed at the divine hammer and asked softly whether it was truly unwilling to remain only a forge hammer. Back at Chushui Pavilion, dinner that day was just 3 simple dishes brought back from the dining hall. I hadn't cooked them myself. Yingbing ate quietly and gracefully as always, but after only half a bowl, she put down her chopsticks. The food really did taste dull and lifeless. Her gaze drifted lightly toward me. I was sitting there, mechanically stuffing rice into my mouth, my whole face full of doubt and emotional damage. Earlier, Murong Xiao had quietly told me that the disturbance in Shenfeng Cave might have been caused by the Panji meteor hammer below. But I had never practiced hammer arts in my life. If a divine hammer had really taken a liking to me, then did that mean I wasn't actually suited to swordsmanship at all? Was I supposed to be some hammer user instead? My mind immediately produced a horrifying mental image of myself giving an evil grin while swinging a giant hammer and smashing people's skulls open. I slammed my chopsticks down and forcefully drove that vision out of my head. No, absolutely not. Even so, I kept practicing my sword afterward. Truthfully, if any elder had seen it, they probably would have praised it as decent sword talent. Reaching small success in only 10 days really did count as some level of aptitude. Even Yingbing thought it was at least acceptable. Of course, compared to true sword geniuses, it was still a very long way off. In her memories from her previous life, there had been monsters even more terrifying than this. People born with sword hearts and sword bones, capable of seeing any sword art once and immediately refining it into something better. Freaks who had created ultimate sword arts at 10 years old and brought divine-level sword arts to perfection by 20. Those people had truly existed, and one of them had even been an opponent she defeated personally. There was also the little princess of Great Yu, born as a natural sword embryo, whose sword talent had been even more horrifying. If I had known what Yingbing was thinking, I probably would only have laughed bitterly. I knew my own situation best. I had spent more years using martial insight on the sword than I had actually been alive, and I still could only barely be called acceptable. That meant my real talent was probably nowhere near impressive. As I practiced, I had to admit one brutal truth. What I was doing wasn't really practicing the sword. At best, it was just waving one around. After a full round, I hadn't improved in the slightest, and worse, I didn't even know what direction I should be trying to improve in. Effort wasn't the scariest thing. The scariest thing was not even knowing where to direct your effort. Was I really just not cut out to be a swordsman? Then Yingbing's clear, cold voice suddenly sounded beside my ear. She said this sword art was centered on restraint, not wild release. The longer power was stored, the greater the final burst would be. That meant the sword had to be used like embroidery, controlling every tiny trace of force with care. The stronger my control became, the more force I would be able to accumulate before exploding outward in a single strike. While speaking, she had already taken the green steel sword from my hand. Her sword movements were focused and serious, every motion carrying a kind of harmonious beauty untouched by mortal dust. I stared blankly. At the same time, I couldn't help feeling confused. Yingbing had obviously never practiced Fire Crane Thousand Feathers before. Was what she said really right? I immediately decided to verify it with the system. The result came at once. 20 years of martial insight were injected successfully. Because of Yingbing's guidance, I had found the correct direction for practicing Fire Crane Thousand Feathers, and the sword art jumped straight to great mastery. A flood of sword understanding poured into my mind like water. But instead of feeling happy, I only felt more emotionally complicated than before. Yingbing's guidance had really been correct. There was no way she had practiced this sword art before. She had only watched me perform it once, and that had been enough to point me onto the right path. After finishing, the girl lowered the sword, turned around, and softly asked if I had learned it. It was obvious she hadn't asked casually. She had genuinely wanted to teach me and had genuinely believed that after seeing it once, I should have improved. In that instant, I suddenly remembered asking a top student for help with a math problem back in my previous life. They would casually write out 4 different solutions without looking up, every one of them beyond the syllabus, and then sincerely ask, "Got it?" My mood became indescribably complicated. Yingbing looked at me, and in her slightly lowered eyes, my awkward figure was reflected back at me. A faint trace of satisfaction passed through her gaze. Not bad. If she could teach me, then I wasn't completely hopeless. I counted as someone with the material for swordsmanship. I turned around to say I had gotten it right this time, but she was already gone. Apparently, she had gone straight back to cultivating. I stood there and thought. Yingbing had already opened her meridians. I had originally believed that my own speed in the Chi-Blood realm was already terrifying, and that even someone with red fate might not necessarily catch up to me. But what had just happened served as a perfect reminder to stop getting arrogant. I quietly put away that little bit of pride in my heart and went back to my room to sit cross-legged and cultivate. Next door, Yingbing opened her eyes. Frost crystals on her eyelashes glimmered faintly. Her 9th meridian had formed. From the moment she first opened her meridians until now, only half a month had passed, yet she had already condensed 9 of them. In her previous life, it had taken her a full 3 months. Her progress in realm was already several times faster than before, but her combat power was stronger by far more than that. At present, her body could already support the use of perfect-level sword arts. Her combat experience, if placed in all the 9 heavens and 10 earths, would still be uncontested at the absolute top. On top of that, she carried the power of Taiyin. Even though she could not yet fully control it, a single thread of that aura was already enough to serve as a deadly trump card. The sect trial should be enough to deal with any unforeseen complication. And if she could also obtain one of the 9 souls of the 9-colored primordial emperor, then in the Qi blood realm she could finally be called perfect. Then there was still that mysterious system. A trace of anticipation flashed through Yingbing's eyes. There was no doubt in her mind that when the rankings appeared, she would be first. The system reward she received then would only make her stronger. Speaking only of the Qi blood realm, across all of ancient and modern history in the 9 heavens and 10 earths, she dared claim she had no equal. 3 days passed in a flash. I stood up from cultivation and judged that I had probably reached around the 7th meridian by now. My legs were sore and numb after sitting too long, so I opened the bundle beside me. Inside were 2 sets of clothes Mother had sewn for Yingbing and me, along with a letter from Father. The handwriting was a mess, full of excitement and badly controlled strokes. From the first few lines alone, I could tell Father had been so thrilled while writing that he could barely hold the brush steady. He praised us again and again for both becoming true disciples of Qingyuan sect, then immediately shifted tone and began telling me that now I had become a true disciple and learned martial arts, I should also mature a little. I needed to stop fooling around, act more steady, and not be as wild as before. Then came the real purpose. As a proper man, now that the household conditions were good, it was time to start thinking about marriage. I also needed to be especially good to little Binger. The 2 of us had known each other since childhood, had now entered Qingyuan sect together, and had both become true disciples. That was a heaven-given connection. Since the moon was closest from the waterside pavilion, I needed to take the opportunity and seize it well. Father's urgency practically seeped off the page, and at the end he even wrote that by next year he wanted to be holding a big, fat grandson. I could only stare blankly. In my previous life, I had been 26 and already dying under constant family pressure to settle down. Now in this life, at 16, I still hadn't escaped the marriage and kids pressure. Fine. In Great U, men marrying at 16 really wasn't unusual. But was this actually my problem? I had a headache just imagining it. I truly couldn't picture the ice block fiancé as some gentle, virtuous wife and mother. Father was going to be disappointed. I took Yingbing's new clothes and knocked on the next room. I told her mother and father had sent sewn outfits. From inside came her calm voice telling me to leave them at the door. I nodded and went to heat breakfast. Not long after, footsteps came down the stairs. I turned back on instinct and the bun in my mouth silently slipped down. The fitted clothing made Yingbing's figure look even more elegant and refined. Her legs were already absurdly long, and now the black gauze-like fabric clearly outlined their lines. It wasn't literally black silk, but a material called Wuyun gauze, light, tough, resistant to both heat and cold. Whoever had invented that stuff was a genius. Yingbing suddenly said that she would wait for me at Wangyu Cliff for 1 hour, and that I should get there if I could. Wangyu Cliff? Why? I had no idea why she would suddenly say that. But as usual, she had absolutely no intention of explaining. So I immediately activated my Fate Eye. Yingbing, age 16. Rootbone, Taiyan Moon, Phoenix Body. Realm. Qi Blood Realm, 10 Veins. Red Fate. Recent encounter. During the upcoming sect trial, she planned to go to an inheritance land and obtain one of the 9 souls of the primordial emperor. And because she wanted to repay a favor, she was preparing to bring me along with her.